Yiddishkeit is supposed to be good for you, and that is the position of Torah and Chassidus.
Right.
That is the position of the ultimate truth, of the latest Tekufa, Sheftim and Aleph, and other places. Like, your life is supposed to be awesome. And Frum awesome, Frum Greatness. It's being Frum should mean, and this is really the way Yiddishkeit was presented to me at the very beginning. The Jewish way of doing marriage is better than the secular way of doing marriage. The Jewish approach to Parnasa is going to be more successful than the non-Jewish approach to Parnasa if there's not one non-Jewish approach.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But the point is, when you follow this approach, it's supposed to be very good for you.
Right. When you're at a good Teichendige Farbringen and you wish it was being recorded? Welcome to Spreading the Springs, Conversations in Chassidus, a podcast for Farbringen where we have real conversations about real Chassidus. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
I'm sitting here with Rabbi Aryeh Gurewitz. The way we know each other is we work together in Lubavitcher Ocean Parkway.
Yep. Curriculum
Director, Student Progress, and that's your position. And I'm a teacher, and I help you out with the curriculum.
Turn to Rosh Masifta.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a lot more to your story, so let's start with that. What's your story?
So I guess the story in terms of like how it relates to applying Chassidus.
Yeah.
So my story is, I grew up in Florida, went to Reform Hebrew School, and I grew up in a very Jewish area, but there wasn't a lot of like exposure, at least for me, to Torah, to Orthodox Judaism, to definitely not to Chassidus or Chabad. Maybe there was Chabad there, but I didn't know about it at that time. I first started to learn about, traditional Orthodox Judaism. What I was told used to exist. That's the way they talk about it growing up. It's like it used to be that when you needed the daven, that you would have to get together 10 people to make a minyan. And it used to be that they pronounced patach and kamatz as two different sounds, stuff like that. So Orthodox Judaism was really not on my radar. But I was always interested in Judaism, and I was always philosophically minded. I would say I always wanted to learn like the wisdom. I was never into, back then, I was never into, okay, let's all hang out together because we're Jewish, like Jewish community or like Israel even, or like that kind of stuff. I was into like, if there's wisdom in Judaism, then I'm interested in that. And where that led me was when I got to college, I went pretty much the first week that I was on campus, I went to a Jewish activities fair. And there was something called the Maimonides Leaders Fellowship. And I was like, oh, Maimonides, I've heard of that guy. Maimonides Medical Center, that's where I was born. My Reform rabbi said something about Maimonides by my bar mitzvah. So I was like, Maimonides, maybe that's something I want to look at. And it turned out that was a Litvish Kiruv program, which I joined. It was absolutely amazing. And basically less than a year later, I felt like I was ready to go. I was ready to start keeping Shabbos. Like it was that amazing for me. And my second year in college, I went on a birthday trip that summer before my second year of college. I put on tefillin by the Kaisel, so that was my first encounter with Chabad, if I'm remembering correctly. And the shliach there says, so you go to University of Pennsylvania, you must know Levi Haskelevich. I'm like, whoa, this guy on the other side of the world knows the name of the rabbi on my campus. I barely know. I heard his name maybe once. A friend told me about him. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to go meet him properly if this rabbi on the other side of the world knows who he is, So my sophomore year, second year of college, I went and I wanted to start keeping Shabbos. And I didn't really know how to keep Shabbos, but I was like, I want to be going to Shabbos meals and whatever. And then it was going to be Tishrei. And there's going to be 3-day Yom Tovim. And I'm like, well, it doesn't make sense to keep Shabbos and not Yom Tov, so I guess I need somewhere to be for Tishrei. And that was how I really started spending time at the Chabad house, because it was right there on campus. And so that was where I spent Tishrei, and I started becoming close with Levi Haskelevich, and he started spending a lot of time with me and answering a lot of my questions, answering them very well. And so for a while I was kind of in this in-between zone between the Litvish Kiruv and Chabad. Obviously, I ended up here. So I would say a big part of what drew me in, I mean, we could talk for an hour about this by itself, but a big part of what I would say drew me to Chabad was the idea that there's kind of this higher spiritual reality, and we want to be aligned with that. Whether that meant in Maisa B'Poel, so like, for example, the fact that we wear tzitzis when we go to sleep is not something that B'Pashas Al Pi Nigla that you need to do. Although now I've read reasons why it's a good thing Al Pi Nigla also, because you would wake up in the morning, right? It used to be that if they got up before Elisa Shachar, so you could put on tzitzis after you wake up. So there's a mile of doing Al Pi Nigla, but the way I understood it at that time was this is something that Rizal says to do.
Right.
So there's like a spiritual reason for doing it. So I'm like, okay, if the Rizal sees or knows about, or however he knows what he knows, that there's some kind of reason to wear tzitzis when you go to sleep, then like I want to do that. And the same thing is true not only in Maisa B'Poel, but also in midas, and I mean, it's one thing not to get angry because it's not a good midah. It's another thing not to get angry because the thing happened to you because Hashem made it happen to you, and Hashem loves you, so He's actually delivering to you a good thing. So why are you getting angry about it?
Right.
Also, the idea of having a Rebbe, the idea of there being someone that is giving you direction based on this higher understanding, based on whatever type of communication he has with Hashem that the rest of us don't have.
Right.
So that was really a big part of how I started shifting in that direction.
Of Chassidus.
Yeah.
So like the depth of Yiddishkeit, in a sense. Like you're saying, like both in the philosophy and in the understanding and the midos and the Maisa B'Poel, the depth, let's say, of the Maisa B'Poel.
Yeah. I mean, I would say there was a lot of depth in what I experienced from the Litvish Kiruv also, but it was a different type of depth, which I also valued very much. And which still has an impact on me until today, but I would say it was more a depth of like wisdom of living a good life in this world, like what a good marriage looks like, real personal growth. I think they have a lot to offer in those areas. But I'm referring with this that drew me to Chassidus more to like the spiritual depth. Like there's an actual spiritual realm. There's like more to reality than meets the eye. And we want to be aligned with that. We want to grow in our awareness of that, our understanding of that, and live our lives like that, in accordance with that.
Right. So, in other words, like let's say in Chassidus, we know that there's the part of Chassidus that discusses philosophy, chakira, depth, basically, and then there's the part of Chassidus that talks about elikos. So in other words, you're saying that it was you could have a lot of philosophy. You have philosophy in Rishonim also. You have Chakira from that's not Chassidus per se. What Chassidus l'chayr came to add for that was the connection of elikos with Chakira. In other words, the Chakira of elikos, the limud, the learning and understanding and the depth of Hashem, of another reality that like. Not a philosophy that's based on something that we could essentially talk about and pinpoint and then just understand it on a deeper level and cultivate it, but understanding and a depth that's on something that might be inherently not palpable, not tangible, Hashem, but then making it real, making it, discovering it, and really, yeah. Okay, that sounds like a very.
Does that make sense with how you know me?
With how I know you for sure, but it makes sense also in terms of what Chassidus officially came to give us. In other words, It's like your discovery of Chassidus sounds like what we're all supposed to have in Chassidus. You know what I mean? Like this is like this is what we're supposed to be. Like this is what learning Chassidus is supposed to be different than learning, Gemara for sure, but even let's say Chakira. Let's say a person is pandering in Kuzari or Mer Nevuchim or Chvesas.
Right.
And obviously not to say Chas Shalom that Mer Nevuchim is not talking about Hashem, but it's not. I don't think you have to say that it's the primary focus. Let's say Mer Nevuchim per se, it's talking about Torah, it's talking about mitzvahs, it's talking about the reason behind the mitzvahs. So obviously it relates back to Hashem. Chassidus, we're literally talking about Hashem. That's the topic. We might be using words of Atzilus, of Ak, of Keser, or whatever, but it's talking about Hashem. It's talking about Hashem's energy coming down into this world in one way or another.
Right.
And so it's technically a very abstract concept. It's not starting from the point of the person's life and the person's fulfillment, even of mitzvahs. It's starting from Hashem and then his connection to it.
It's like Da'as Elokei Avicha v'avdeu b'leiv shalom. It starts with this knowledge of God, and then you bring that down.
Exactly. So that
I have a whole story about that Hayom Yom of Vav Tevis, which is my son's birthday. But it basically says that, like, as much as we're learning like in Yonim, Nailim, and Velokos, but the point is ultimately for you to feel connected to Hashem and you to improve your midas through this deep knowledge of even things like the Kav and the Rishimu and the Oren Seif Shalif Net Tzimtzum and stuff like that. Like that's supposed to affect you as a person.
Right.
That I think is unique to Chassidus, or maybe you could say that about also people who are learning Kabbalah. But yeah, that concept that there's a spiritual reality, there's knowledge of Hashem to be had, and then we're going to base everything on that.
And then the punchline is to make it real in your life, because we could be talking about spiritual reality that has nothing to do with your life.
Right.
The Chiddush of Chassidus is that as much as you're going to learn the spiritual reality, now the eye-opening moments it's your reality.
Right.
And you have to make it your reality.
Right. One of the biggest things that influenced me early on, if I would point to like a few things I learned in Chassidus, like I was learning the Chassidic Heritage series, my Marim from Kos, like these English ones that they put out.
Right.
One of the ones that really influenced me was actually Kunshas HaTefillah, which people find interesting because Kunshas HaTefillah is kind of like this, it gets into all these technicalities about the right way to be mispainted and the wrong way to be mispainted, and it's hard to even like keep up with like all the different wrong ways of hispainedness that it talks about. I was just looking at it before I came because I was just thinking about it and being reminded of it. But what stuck with me is like the overall message of like, it's really, really important that you actually connect yourself with this and align yourself with it. And there's changes in your emotions that go with that. There's a way of living that aligns with it, and there's a way of living that doesn't align with it. So whether I understood all the types of prate hispainedness there, but that's one place where you see the message very strongly. And it's from the Rabbi Rashab, which I think a lot of Bachrim in Yeshiva associate the Rabbi Rashab with a lot of Haskalah.
Right.
But then you have the contrastum of the Rabbi Rashab, which really Kunshas HaTefillah is like, basically it starts off saying that, okay, you have all these Maimarim and you're wondering what you're supposed to do with them.
Right. But he says that people feel that they're learning a lot, but it's not helping them in their actual davening, right? He says
Right. And Kunshas HaTefillah is about bridging that gap. So I learned it. I wouldn't say I started davening the way Kunshas HaTefillah says to daven, but I got the message that the whole point of this is to align yourself with it, to change because of it.
Wow.
So that was like a very important hanacha for me early on about like what Chabad is about.
Right. So let's go back to your story. So when you start learning Chassidus, you're still in college.
Yeah.
I guess with Rabbi Chassidus or by yourself, whatever you could come across.
Yeah, I mean, he gave me a lot of time, and I also got like Chayenu. I think it was Tafshin Ayin Beis, and Chayenu was printing these little pieces of Ayin Beis in English. I'm learning Ayin Beis in English. And he would give shiurim, and he would spend a lot of time answering my questions and stuff. And I actually started making chavrusas with people at a certain point. I would say, it's funny, this is like the word of Shtusta Kedusha. There was a certain like extracurricular thing that I was involved with for 20 hours a week for about a year. And it was like a commitment. So like I resented it, but I didn't quit it because officially I committed to it. And then afterwards I was like, okay, if I could spend 20 hours a week on that, I could spend 20 hours a week on learning Torah, learning Chassidus, whatever it is. So I got to a point where I was like learning with like, I would say like 10 to 13 chavrusas, like an hour a week Chassidus, just because I had to like spread the word,
Oh, you're saying like fellow students?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You were teaching them?
Yeah. At a certain point, I'm saying this wasn't like day one, but it was like, if you know Aleph, teach Aleph.
Right.
It was so obvious to me that we have to like spread the word about this because it just changed my life.
Wow. Were you
like there were the modern Orthodox students there. So like I remember one guy we had a chavrusa called Tanya and Tangents, because we would start with Tanya, but then we would discuss like whatever. Or like I would try to find things like if there was a guy who was thinking of marrying his non-Jewish girlfriend, I would learn with him like Mitzvah Savas Yisrael from the Tzemach Tzedek in English, to try to get him to see like the Jewish neshama, stuff like that. I would try to find like what's something that, this guy was into. There was a statistics professor who was into Midrashim, like he would just sit and learn Medrash. And I'm like, no, but you got to understand how deep the Medrash is. So I learned with him B'yai Mashdei Asar, and he was like blown away by the way the Rebbe like goes so deep into the, like 3 different ways of explaining that Medrash,
Right.
He's like used to just reading the Medrash in order.
Right. How did you know all this by then? Like, how did you know that there was a B'yai Mashdei Asar that talked about a Medrash?
It was whatever was available in English, pretty much.
Wow.
Their Sichos in English has a Chassidic treasure chest version of that mimer.
Right. So you're learning on your own in time, and then you find something. Then you're like, okay, I could pass this on to this person.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. You at this point you're from.
I'm sure that I became from like pretty quickly. I mean, my second year of college, this is all over like a 3.5 year span that I was in college.
Okay.
So I'm not necessarily saying every detail in order,
Right.
but yeah, I pretty much became from my second year. I took things on over time, like kashrus and like different stuff, but like Shabbos, let's say, was from the beginning of my second year of college. So
Wow. So you literally became from and started teaching Chassidus right away. Like,
pretty much, something like that. I don't remember the exact timeline, but yeah, there's actually
really
like a work study program where you could pay some of your tuition by working. So officially, I worked for the Chabad house teaching Chassidus. I think that was only the last year that I was officially like a thing.
So you were already on college shluchas at this point. You're like,
Yeah.
like
It was like so self-evident to me that like that's what I was going to do with my life. Like
campus shluchas.
Yeah, or not necessarily campus shlichus, but some form of spreading the word about Chassidus and Yiddishkeit. You know, like what it did for my life in such a short time was just incredible. And I'm like, we got to just tell everyone. You know? Right. So I started with that very quickly.
Okay, then you finished college or you ended early?
So I went to yeshiva a couple times while I was in college, Rabbi Storfer's yeshiva in Miami. I went there for like a summer program and a winter program. That was like short term. My parents really insisted that I finish college and not take a break or anything like some people do, which I think was a good move. And I finished a semester early because I came in with a lot of what they call like AP credits, like basically college credits that you get in high school by taking advanced classes. So I was able to finish a little early. I also took Hebrew and Yiddish while I was in college. That was fun because I knew I was going to be going to yeshiva. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take the language classes while I'm here. So that gave me a little bit of a head start on learning inside. But yeah, I finished college and I went to Rabbi Storfer's yeshiva it was basically Yud Shvat that year until the end of the year. Then I went to Torah for a year. That was an interesting turn in my journey. And then I went to Morristown for a year and got married a little bit after that. That's the short version. We can zoom in on whichever part you want.
Right. So so there's I shortchanged you by just introducing you as that we work together. You also have something that's really, really cool, which the audience should know about, which is your coaching.
Yeah.
You want to tell us about that?
Sure. So first of all, it's your fault. So hopefully it's good things that are coming to the world from it. What could I say about my coaching?
It's the obvious question I need to ask is why are we talking about coaching in the middle of a podcast about Chassidus?
Well, hopefully coaching is not something separate from Chassidus. So why are we talking about coaching in a podcast about Chassidus? Because coaching is about, coaching the way I see coaching. Obviously, that's not the way that the entire world is experiencing the industry of coaching, but it's something that to me has been, I'm talking about in my life, not me as the coach. I also have worked with coaches, particularly Aryeh Weinstein, who is the one that, you've made that connection. And that to me was like, I would say, let me preface like this. There's applying Chassidus when you're a bacher, and your day is basically davening and learning. And there's applying Chassidus when you're married and you have kids and you have parnasa and you're much more involved in the world and other people and, jobs and money and stuff like that. It's a totally different chachma. I mean, obviously it's the same Chassidus, but the application of it can be much more complex, And so when I worked with Aryeh Weinstein, basically, okay, we're skipping around, but basically I went through a tekufa where I toned down my teaching, and you probably remember there was a time when I was giving Mashiach shirim and writing a Mashiach Q&A column every week. I kind of toned that down when I started at Ocean Parkway. I was focused on family, chinuch is like a whole. I'm becoming the curriculum director of a Jewish school, and I don't have a Jewish elementary school education myself. There was a lot to concentrate on. Having kids, that was a whole new world. So I got to a point where the way that I learned to apply Chassidus in yeshiva was not helping me with the sort of quote unquote real world challenges anymore, and I needed some help, and I wasn't super interested in therapy or coaching or anything like that really, because to me Chassidus has all the answers. Chassidus is the ultimate truth. Look at what it says in the Yana Shal Teres Chassidus. All the chachma of the world is a mix of Tev and Ra, but Chassidus is the ultimate truth.
Right.
And any truth that's in the world, Chassidus has it also. So what would I need help for? Also, the idea of speaking to people about what's going on personally, that was like a totally new thing for me also. So Aryeh Weinstein was really the perfect person to be like someone that I could trust, that I'm opening up to him and I'm getting a real perspective of a chassid and a shliach and all of that, and it was just transformative for me. And as I'm saying this, I never actually thought of this until right now, but it's kind of that same feeling of when I became Frum and I was like, I have to tell everyone about this. It was actually that exact same thing. It was like, I still remember the moment when I had the thought like this, like in other words, this coaching, like this is what people need. Like people need from me, like if I'm going to now get back into my tenuah of teaching like I used to the college students, like I felt like the biggest contribution I could make is not to give another shir. There's plenty of amazing shirim. I felt like the biggest contribution I could make, and also what I felt like drawn to do, was to speak to people about what's going on in their life. Because speaking to Aryeh Weinstein about what was going on in my life gave me things that no mimer ever could, not because of a shortcoming in the mimer, but what I see now is that you're limited by the way you hear the mimer, and you're limited by blockages that you have going on inside, that if you don't speak about those directly, or find another way of working on them directly, I find speaking to be a very good one, then the mimer just doesn't go in the same way, or the messages of the Rebbe don't go in the same way. So I told Aryeh Weinstein, I was like, it sounds crazy, you're the coach over here, but I kind of feel like I could be doing this also. And he totally encouraged me. He wasn't like defensive that, there's going to be another coach and it's going to take away clients or whatever. Nothing like that. He was totally committed to like me achieving my potential, and he totally just, encouraged me. And I'm doing that for a few years now, and Baruch Hashem, I've managed to balance that with yeshiva. I'm still in yeshiva, but coaching on Fridays and Sundays. You
could give yourself a plug. What's it called? How can people find you?
My website right now is called aryehgurewitz.com, but I think it's going to be changed soon to frumgreatness.com. Because that it took me time to get to this message of Frum Greatness. Anybody who's listening that sees my WhatsApp status, they've seen hashtag Frum Greatness probably hundreds of times. But the message is basically that a Torah life, and I feel like this message is like a fusion of everything we just said, like the Litvish Kiruv and the message of Chassidus. A Torah life is supposed to be a successful life. Like that's the script. Of course, Hashem gives us Bechir Chavshus, so we can go off script. But it's supposed to be that if a person is living according to Torah, then they should be happy in their life. They should have a good marriage. They should be able to earn a parnasa. These things, we all know that there's so much struggle going on in this area today, and there's all kinds of reasons for that. And I think if we really apply the Torah's wisdom properly, it doesn't have to be so complicated.
So, in other words, the famous pasuk Chassidus always quotes, "Kim asas adam yashar." Hashem made a person to be straightforward.
Right.
So usually when we read that pasuk and learn about Chassidus, it's talking about in terms of doing the right thing. I think that's usually how it's quoted simply in Chassidus, that the way the world is supposed to run is on Torah mitzvahs, and then usually it's followed by, and if a person messed up, so then there's tshuva, then there's another possibility. So you're saying that Al-Kim Asas Adam Yashar also means like mentally and physically and emotionally.
Interesting. I don't think of that pasuk often. Happens to be the pasuk I really think about is the pasuk in Parshas V'eschan of Chachmaschem V'inaschem Le'nei Ha'amim.
Okay. Right.
And it's really a few psukim over there, which I don't have the psukim Baal Peh, but basically there's a few repeated lashonos there in Parshas V'eschan about our wisdom and our understanding and our greatness. The nations will say Migoy Gadol, like there's a great nation like this that's so close to Hashem that He answers their prayers and stuff like that. And there's a very interesting Rashi over there, which says, the pasuk says something about being careful not to forget. We say it in the Sheish Zechiros, but it's a different. I think in Sheish Zechiros we're thinking of Matan Torah, but here Rashi says something a little different. Basically, Rashi says that the nations will see the Jewish people as a wise and understanding nation. That's only if we do the mitzvahs al mitasam. If we do them the true way, if we do them the way they're meant to be. But if we distort them, like I think the Lashon is v'im tavsu isam, like if you distort them, b'teich shechicha, then you get the opposite result and you look like fools. You look like shaitim.
Wow.
So basically what that means is that Hashem gave us the Torah and gave us a choice. This is not talking about not being frum, right? This is talking about you could either do the mitzvahs the way they truly are, or you could do them in a distorted version because you don't have it exactly clear in your mind the way it's supposed to be, right? And that will make the difference whether you're seen as wise people or as fools.
Wow. So in other words, you're saying that if the goyim are seeing the us as wise because of Torah, then obviously something that even the goyim could relate to. In other words, a life that they could appreciate is a healthy life, it's a productive life, it's a positive life, and that's why we know it has to be in every aspect, not just right.
Yeah, exactly. Which is so interesting because I think we can get caught up in a story in our heads like the opposite, like we have the Torah and it's totally l'mayla mitam v'das, and nobody understands like why it's valuable and whatever, and so they don't like us. And I think it's possible for a person to have that kind of narrative in their head. I'm not saying everybody does, obviously, but that doesn't really seem to be the message. The message seems, or I think more famous is like or lagoyim, right? Like Hashem's chosen people are meant to be a light to the nation. Like we're supposed to be demonstrating the life that Hashem had in mind, and other people are supposed to say, "Wow, that's amazing." Mm-hmm. Another example of it is in Parshas V'zayis HaBracha. It talks about Yisachar and Zvulun, and it says that people would meet Zvulun, doing business with them, and then they would come to Yerushalayim, and they would be amazed by what's going on over there, the Torah and the food. I don't understand that Rashi about the food, and somebody could explain that one to me. That would be helpful. But in other words, people come to Yerushalayim and see what's going on over there,
right?
And they're amazed. They're like, I want to be part of this, And the same, it's like I right away think of like Crown Heights. Like, is this what happens? We have shluchim that go out and people are amazed,
right? And
then you come to Crown Heights and hopefully you're even more amazed and you really want to be part of it.
Right. Right. So far what you're describing is that by living a life from greatness, like you said. So how does Chassidus come into that? I mean, I think the answer
how does it not come into it? What do you mean?
Exactly. Meaning, this is what you're describing is about technically making the Torah ideals and principles and values real in a person's life to the point that even, like you said, even a guy could appreciate that this is a powerful life. This is a productive life. Yeah. Can you do this without learning Chassidus? Can you do this without doing the same process of applying the principles and the values of Chassidus?
So obviously, it's the thing that I'm talking about now is Pshutei Shel Mikra, right?
Yeah.
So I actually kach in that. It's actually good you're bringing that up because I think that one thing that was clear to me always from my journey is like, I think sometimes, I don't know, it's hard to know how many people, feel the different feelings that I'm saying. Like sometimes I say these different things about what people feel, like what I said a minute ago. And I know there are going to be people that are like, what is he talking about? Like I've never had that thought cross my mind ever. But it's like, I'm telling you, these are real things that happen in the world, like I talk to people. Yeah. So I'm always like nervous to like give these examples. It's like, it's like, what do you mean people struggle with wanting Mashiach? I'm like, yeah, no, it's true. There are people that struggle with wanting Mashiach, and it's okay. We don't have to pretend that not, But then people are like, what do you mean by that? Anyway.
So then it's not then this is not for them.
So what was that all of, what was that an introduction
about
to?
About the Pshutei Shel Mikra,
Oh, yeah. So I think that sometimes it's possible, I'm so like, people are going to be like, what are you talking about? It's possible to have this perspective where like Chassidus is amazing and the Torah without Chassidus is not so amazing. And there's a lot of reasons why someone could have that perspective. Like, first of all, someone might have that experience. They might experience Chassidus as great and Gemara as not so great. That might have been their experience in Shiva, whatever. They also might not have learned, like a Rashi and Ramban on Chumash and seen how like profound one of those machleksim can be. You know what I mean? Like sometimes people have an experience where Chassidus is the awesome part of Torah and the rest of Torah is like not necessarily, And I think that's a mistake. I think that the perspective of the Rebbe is like, and all the Rebbeim, like obviously is Torah is amazing. And within Torah, then there's this extra special part of Torah. There's the Razan, there's the Nishmasa, the Nishmasa. So I think it's actually very important. An important part of the correct perspective of Chassidus is also to appreciate Pshutei Shel Mikra and Nigla, and like if the Rambam gives you marriage advice, let's say, so Chassidus would want you to be highly aware that's actually not the Rambam's marriage advice, that's God's marriage advice. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right. So I think that part of Chassidus is appreciating nigla.
Right. As you're saying, especially in this concept of appreciating how Torah's values and Torah's ideas are also for you in your life, that is a Chassidus ingredient.
Right.
That is a Chassidus perspective, even if you happen to be learning a Gemara and happen to be learning a Chumash.
Right. Like we talk about this all the time in Yeshiva. I always use the example of a sukkah. It's like, okay, a sukkah has to be less than 20 amas high, right? It's like, no. Before Hashem created the world, he thought about a sukkah, and he thought about a Jew sitting in the sukkah, and he thought that if a Jew sits in a sukkah that is higher than 20 amas, then that is going to be, and eats a sandwich there, then that's going to be an avera instead of a mitzvah. Like Hashem thought about that before he created the world. Okay, now you're ready to go learn about the sukkah.
Right.
You know? So the same thing is true, like when the Rambam talks about how the Chachamim commanded a husband to treat a wife and how the wife should treat the husband. You know, that's like something that is of Hashem's Chachma, that is 2,000 years before the world, and it doesn't mean Zman, it means Madrega. You know, it means like there's a Sfiras HaChachma, and inside the Sfiras HaChachma is Hashem's thoughts about how you should treat your wife. Mm-hmm. You know?
Right. So, okay, so you're saying it's Frum Greatness. You're saying that Frum Greatness is basically that exact formula of taking the concept of Frum, of what Torah says, and making it greatness, like in your life. That is a Chassidus. That is a Chassidus exercise, so to speak. In other words, that is something that Chassidus helps you be able to tap into. I mean, the Rebbe drilling in Torah Lashon Hara. Eventually, you're supposed to be able to think about that, even when you're not learning a sicha, even when you're learning a pasuk.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I would say the specific idea of Frum Greatness, I would never have come to the idea of Frum Greatness necessarily with the highest I have for it without Chassidus. Technically, I'm actually basing the message in Pshat for a reason, because I really believe it's for every single Jew.
Right.
You know? But Chassidus just adds further chayas, adds further understanding, adds further appreciation, you know, of every part of Torah. I also would say that I have a PDF guide that I made called the 5 Foundations of Frum Greatness, which is basically 5 ideas that the way I would describe it is to say that if everybody had these 5 mental and emotional sort of pillars installed firmly in their psyche, you know, then the world would be a much better place. Mm-hmm. And some of those I would say are based on Chassidus, like for example, having a sense of purpose. Having a sense of purpose is a big topic in Yiddishkeit, is a big topic in the self-improvement world. When a person has a sense of purpose, actually there's a book that just came out on purpose, which is an amazing book. And in the beginning, there's a whole hakdama about the mila of having a sense of purpose. But there's sense of purpose, which is like my feeling that there's a purpose. Mm-hmm. And then there's like the actual purpose. Right. And a person could have a sense of purpose that doesn't actually have anything to do with the actual purpose that Hashem had in mind when he created the world, or when he's creating the world at every moment. So wouldn't it be the most ideal if my sense of purpose could be derived directly from the actual purpose, which is actually revealed to us? And that's one thing that Chabad Chassidus is very strong about, that Dirah B'tachtonim, yeah, it's a medrash, but I don't know of anybody, I don't know of any sefer or anybody that described Dirah B'tachtonim as the purpose of all creation before the Alter Rebbe. I mean, do you? I've never heard of... No. There's usually explanations that outside of the Chabad world are more typical, like Tavat Tev Lehitiv, and Chassidus brings those things also, like they also have their place, but this emphasis on Dirah B'tachtonim and Avodas HaBerurim, let's say. I mean, this is a whole topic we could go into, but deriving a sense of purpose from Dirah B'tachtonim and Avodas HaBerurim, that would be like a Chassidus specific, application of Frum Greatness. Right. The idea of what I call Hashem-based self-confidence, which is like basically believing in yourself based on Hashem. So what do I mean by that? Is that if there's a purpose, these two things really go together. If there's a purpose, and part of that purpose has been assigned to you, right? Then it must be that Hashem also gave you the capability to fulfill your purpose. The part of the big purpose that's assigned to you, you must be able to do it. In other words, Heiran and the Sinus Koyach go together. That's something the Rebbe talks about,
right?
All the time. And I don't know, or we say like if the Rebbe right now told you to go and do some kind of thing in Australia and whatever, like the appropriate way to do that would be to believe that the Rebbe is sending you with the koiches, that you're going to be able to go do that thing. So I feel like that's like a very Chassidus based idea. I haven't. In my personal knowledge, like I don't see that being emphasized in other Sfarim and stuff the same way as it is in Chassidus.
Right. So let's break this down. So basically, what's happening is you're learning Tanya, let's say, about the Dirah B'tachtonim.
Okay.
Yeah, and obviously Tanya, and then every mimer of the Rebbe talking about Dirah B'tachtonim. And Dirah B'tachtonim is a massive sugya, especially in the Rebbe's Sichos Memarim, and it's a concept, right? There's the Dirah, there's the Tachtonim, and then the Geder of Tachtonim, and exactly what it means to make a Dirah, why Hashem wants the Dirah, how to emphasize that the Dirah is Hashem. Okay, right? All different topics, and then and a person could learn it and understand it and even appreciate it on the, like you're saying, in the sense of that this is the reason why the world was created. You could have that very clear in your mind. The world was created to make a Dirah B'tachtonim. To bring that into your life, to make that part of who you are, is not only that, like when you're at a juncture of doing a right thing or chas v'shalom, the opposite, that you're going to choose to do the right thing because you know that you have a job to make a Dirah B'tachtonim. But you're saying it could actually shape not just the way you make a decision to do something, but actually the way you view yourself as an entire existence, as an entire person, as an entire being.
For sure.
I am here as part of the Dirah B'tachtonim. I am here with a mission, with a purpose. As you're saying.
Yeah.
Or the same thing like in, we said about Hashem-based confidence, right? So you're learning Tanya, Parkway, right? And again, so too, and then every mimer talking about an neshama. And all of a sudden, it takes just a moment of like very lucid clarity of like, so I am the neshama, and like, therefore my entire life is in a neshama. So again, it's not just about like making a certain decision or doing a certain thing because I have a neshama, maybe even because I am a neshama, but actually in every single interaction that I have throughout my entire life, I could be approaching it with a neshama perspective.
100%.
Right.
I think the easiest would be to give an example. So here's a conversation that I've had multiple times. I just had a conversation like this a couple of days ago. A lot of times people are deciding what they want to do for a job. Let's say a bacher who's deciding, he's kind of out of yeshiva already. Like I'm saying, like older bacher, like 23, 24, something like that.
Finish yeshiva.
Not out of yeshiva. He finished yeshiva. So he's thinking about like what job to do. And I've been there also. You've been there also, I'm sure. It's like, it's very easy to look out at the job market and be like, okay, there's this. Where do I fit myself in? And because a lot of times people don't have that much confidence at that stage because they've never like been in the job market, so they're not like, oh, I know that I have this to offer and I'm going to go do that and be very successful at that. It's kind of like, where do I fit in, and that sounds innocent enough, right? But I would say that is actually not a Torah perspective on how to choose your job, because the Torah perspective on how to choose your job, I have a little podcast episode about this one, is choosing your job the Sha'ar Bitachon way, which there's a part of Sha'ar Bitachon, a very small part. Obviously, the main part of Sha'ar Bitachon is the Bitachon. But part of the Bitachon is, hey, Hashem wants you to do Ishtadlus.
Right. And
part of the Bitachon is actually to realize that Hashem designed you. He compares it to animals. Just like Hashem designed animals, He designed their body a certain way to be able to catch the food or digest the food or whatever that they're supposed to eat. Right? Some animals are predators, so they need the claws and the whatever they need in order to catch their prey.
Right.
Some animals eat plants, so they have certain kinds of teeth and whatever. Like I learned about these things in school.
Okay.
And here it is in Sha'ar Bitachon. He says, and also he gave each animal an appetite. The animal knows which food is for it because it feels drawn to it, right? So he says that the same thing is true for us. That he gave each person certain talents, whether with their mind or with their body, and he gave each person a chiba for a certain kind of work, and you should be looking inside of yourself and becoming aware of like, what is it that I have to contribute, and looking at that. So you actually start within yourself, knowing that there's something I'm meant to be doing in the world. I'm mixing in the purpose stuff.
Right.
But there's something I'm meant to be doing in the world, and I'm trying to figure out what that is, and that starts with me. That doesn't start with what's out there. Of course, at some point it meets with what's out there, but there's a whole nother level of like self-worth and confidence, I think, when you see yourself as, I'm here for an important mission. Hashem gave me talents. The talents are gifts from Hashem. It's not ego.
Right.
This is where people, it's like interesting. Like It's like, whoa, I have talents. Like, could I say that I have talent? Can I say that? That doesn't sound like bittul. That sounds like yeshes, right?
So you're saying a lot. Sometimes you have to like rewire a lot more than just what the question was. Like,
yeah. It's like I would want to not just help. So someone might come to me and say that he wants to help choosing his job. Should he do this job or that job? And I'm like, I'm not just going to tell you which job I think is a better job. I'm going to notice if you're operating from the right perspective. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to point that out to you and teach you about that perspective and then ask you, so how does it look now from that other perspective?
Right.
And that can make a huge difference in what you end up deciding to do.
It's more the very fundamental ideas beyond just a specific question.
Right.
The fundamental of principles of Torah and of Chassidus and how to apply that to this specific situation.
Right. So the same thing, let's say you could have the same thing in marriage. You could wonder, okay, I'm doing this, my wife is doing that. How should we work it out? So one thing is, how do you work it out practically? But another thing is, are you seeing this as hashgacha pratis? Are you seeing yourself and your wife as two halves of one neshama, and this is part of your shlichus to work through this challenge? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the whole thing looks different when you look at it with that pair of glasses.
Right. So here's an interesting question. Do you have like a core, and maybe not one, but one of a core principle in Chassidus that you've personally seen, like that when you translate it a certain way or explain it a certain way, all of a sudden it becomes so practical and so relevant in being able to answer so many specific questions? I mean, we kind of mentioned about the neshama part before, so that would be like an example, I guess. But in other words, I'm not asking just, do you have like a go-to concept in Chassidus that could answer so many questions, but also like a go-to concept that so many people might just gloss over or read and understand, but not appreciate the power of it. And then you see how it's so powerful in being able to practically guide a person through many different experiences of life.
There's a few of them. I mean, that's a big part of, I would say, what my 5 foundations are. Like, right. It's kind of like 5 of those, and there are more of them.
Right.
The one that jumps out at me based on what you just asked is, I would say the idea of like Hashem's goodness and the idea of hishtavus. Nice. The Baal Shem Tov's father told him, love every Jew and fear nothing but Hashem. And I take that in a very practical way, because one of the things that I've come to see is that fear is like one of the biggest things that holds people back. And the way it holds us back is not that we are necessarily having anxiety attacks all the time. I mean, that's one type of challenge. But another type of challenge is there are certain things that we won't do or that it won't occur to us to do because we're afraid, but we don't actually feel the fear. We only would feel the fear if we actually start taking that course of action. So like if someone would, let's say they own a business and they're making a certain amount of money, and like there's a part of them that really they would like to make more, mm-hmm. But they're like, nah, then I would have to do X, Y, and Z, and I don't really feel interested in doing that, and whatever. So they'll stick with their current level of income. And they might even say that it's hashgacha pratis that they have this level of income.
Right.
But if you start talking to them about those options, so then you might find that like actually the idea of doing more sales, or take a shliach, that's a good example. The idea of a shliach doing more fundraising than whatever level of fundraising he's doing now. So he's not necessarily having panic attacks every day about fundraising, but if you start talking to him about doubling the amount of money that he's bringing in, and he starts thinking about the types of calls that he would have to make and the types of donors he'd have to reach out to and the type of presentation he'd have to make and all that kind of stuff. And so then it's like there's fear there. But it was behelim.
Right. He wasn't scared of something concretely day to day, but now if you were to go further with this project or whatever, then there would be so many things to be scared of.
Yeah, so I would venture to say that like we all have something like that. We all have ways that we would not even theoretically, we all have ways that we'd be interested in enhancing our lives, but the road brings up some kind of fear, and therefore we don't look at it as like a realistic possibility. And we might not even notice that it's fear, but again, if you start going that direction, you start really envisioning yourself doing that thing, you'll notice the fear. And so the question that comes up is, well, is that fear of Hashem or is that fear of something else?
I don't think anyone would say it's fear of Hashem.
Right. So if it's fear of something else, well, the Baal Shem Tov told us not to have. The Baal Shem Tov's father said not to fear anything else. So now that fear, by definition, is something that I would want to get out of my system. Whether I take the course of action or I don't take the course of action, or I take a different course of action that I didn't even think of yet, but to notice that fear is holding me back.
Wow.
And then I'm going to blame it on Hashem, and I'm going to say, well, it's Hashgach Pratis, there's nothing I can do. Or not Hashgach Pratis, it could be what they call being a victim of circumstances. Listen, that's just the way the world is.
Right.
But actually it's not. On the other side of your fear, there's a whole other life.
Interesting. So that's predicating that this. So it as you were describing this person who's stuck in a certain limited life, I was thinking, as you were saying that, I was thinking like, oh, this talks about Mitzrayim, right? And also, like as we were saying before, this is like a theme you come across all over in Chassidus.
Yeah, this is all Yitzias Mitzrayim.
Right.
Everything we're talking about is Yitzias Mitzrayim.
Right. And I mean, first of all, in as of itself is already like, yeah, okay, so here we have a concept in Chassidus that we're reading about so much, we're learning about so much, and hopefully we have realized at one point or another how practical it is in our life, but all of a sudden this could become something that comes up every week, every month, whatever, every time an opportunity comes up. Okay, so that's already, pretty cool. But so you're saying that to connect that this Mitzrayim is fear. Okay, so that takes a little bit of like, I don't want psychology or self-reflection or
self-awareness.
Self-awareness, yeah, exactly.
I don't think self-awareness is not part of Chassidus.
No, I don't mean psychology in a bad way. I don't mean psychology.
The word psychology can mean a lot of things.
I shouldn't be. Exactly, because I said without context, right?
That's actually one of the things that that's the whole thing, but this actually is something that I would take a stand for, is like this mindset of like, oh, I'm not a psychologist. It's like, no, you're not a psychologist, but you're a chassid. A chassid has to get involved with this inner world. That's a big part of it, Right.
Can we say that that's called being a pnimi? Like,
yeah, I think of the hayamim of me'oivei techakmeni, Chasnis, and the Friedrich Rebbe says everybody has their avodah and their seichel and midas. And the way you know what yours is me'oivei techakmeni. You have to notice the netiyas rois that you have in yourself. Do you get angry? Do you have taiva? Are you lazy? Are you a little too silly?
Right.
What ra do you have inside you? Because we all have ra inside of us. There's nothing. It's not something to be ashamed of. That's part of the shlichus in the world, is to be a person that has ra inside of you and then be mevar it.
Right.
Right. So being aware of our ra is part of our shlichus. That's like very important.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So fine. So this person needs to be a little bit self-reflective and self-aware, and realize that this is...
I just have to say, like, how could you fulfill the Baal Shem Tov's father's Hirah of not being afraid of things other than Hashem if you don't notice when you're being afraid of things other than Hashem?
Oh, so that's
how is it possible?
Well, okay, so in other words, the way I think most people, they hear that story of the Baal Shem Tov's father, and they're like, yeah, okay, when a guy comes over to me and threatens me, whatever,
Right.
So then I'm not going to be scared of him, or whatever, when my Yetzer Hara, in other words, it gets limited to a very certain specific scenario, which may or may not happen ever. And all of a sudden, requiring this understanding, this self-awareness that fear is the factor behind Mitzrayim over here.
Right.
So now all of a sudden it's extremely practical. This lesson of not being scared of anything other than Hashem.
Yeah.
Fine. So okay. So in this particular case, I appreciate you could appreciate very strongly why, I don't mean this particular case, but in this discussion, you could appreciate why you need to have that depth. You need to have that self-awareness. You need to have the ability to have that understanding of how it works. Which could either come from the person himself being very self-aware or from somebody guiding him. I think this is where the coach would definitely be able to see that.
Right.
Sash mashpia, that's not the point. Right. Someone else. Like
second nefesh.
Yeah, exactly. As Rebbe always talks about why you need to have a mashpia, because you're biased. You can't see past the problem the way you see it.
Right.
What about something that could be a little bit simpler, which means what about something that could be like more obvious of that this is what the Chassidus is saying, and just appreciation of how to be able to apply that?
That's so funny. I thought of that as a simple one.
Oh.
But let's go simpler. Simpler. How about the goodness of Hashem?
Yeah.
Which is actually what I was about to bring up.
Right. You started saying that.
The goodness of Hashem. Like Hashem makes every single thing happen, and Hashem is always acting wisely and benevolently.
Right.
Always.
Right.
So the most logical emotion in the world is happiness.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's not a deep academic one. That's not a deep psychological one. That's a very straight up. Even a child could appreciate that. Everything Hashem does is good. Right?
Yeah.
I actually this past Shabbos by my Suda. So I always ask a Seder V'Torah, and then I ask a question. You spoke about Aryeh Weinstein, who is my uncle. So I learned this by him, by his Chabad house. So I do this by my Shabbos table. So Seder V'Torah, and then ask a question usually related to Dvar Torah, an open-ended question. Everybody goes around the table and answers it. So this past Shabbos, I asked, what is an idea in Chassidus that you find is very mind-changing, is very life-changing, is very eye-opening, not just as an interesting idea philosophically, but as a mantra in your life. That was the question. It could be like a specific thought or a concept, whatever. And a lot of people by the Suda actually pointed to that idea about how Hashem is good and Hashem is kind, which also, going back also to what we were speaking about before, that's not like Chassidus per se. That's not a Chiddush of Chassidus that Hashem is kind. Right? We say it every day in davening 100,000 times. It's exaggerating, right? Taiva Hashem L'Kol and Rachma L'Kol. All these psukim are describing the kindness of Hashem.
Right.
Yes, obviously a little bit deeper.
I think Chassidus offers us ways of perceiving it, which maybe are not inherent in the psukim.
Sure. And Chassidus reminds us that it's a constant. Chassidus reminds us that it's an absolute must, that it's not like an option.
Right.
Even that, obviously, you find that in the Rishonim, and you find that in Musar, and you find whatever, and in other works. I don't think anyone would say it's a chiddush of Chassidus. But going back to what we said, Chassidus will highlight that. Chassidus will turn that into a topic of, like we said, of consistency. This will be able to be a mantra because it's a truism. It's a maxim.
Right.
So being able to, I think that's a good example because it's not something very super lofty. It's not something super deep. It does require a lot of emunah and conviction that this is true always, and I'll be able to apply this always to my life.
Right.
Right. Okay. So that's something that you talk about a lot in your conversations with people?
Yeah, I ran a group program recently for the first time, and there was a lot of conversation about this specific, probably more than any one point. Was there was a lot of good stuff that everybody brought to the table in that group, but I think this one came up again and again. And I was going to say, I think of the skill chabina, right? Which very often the response to that is well, that's very high level,
Right.
And we do that. We distance ourselves from the ideals of Chassidus by saying, well, that's a high level.
Right. Do you want to just touch what it talks like?
Yeah. I mean, basically, the Alter Rebbe says there that that your ratzon for banei chayim v'zaynei, basically all worldly matters, should be nothing. You should be equally happy either way. Hein v'lav shaven atzlei bashva amitis. If you have children or don't have children, you have money. You don't have money, you have health. You don't have health. It's hard to say these things. We don't wish these things on anybody.
Of course. You can't just tell us to someone else. Someone needs to say this for themselves.
In a very, very personal conversation where there's a lot of trust, it becomes, and then the person knows that you're not downplaying what they're going through.
Right.
It becomes possible.
Right. Okay.
Very delicately and very sensitively, obviously. But it comes up. But also even just for ourselves, right?
That's the
Chassidus is basically talking there about, I would call it unconditional happiness. The technical term is hishtavus. Sometimes hishtavus could be translated as sort of like a stoic thing. I don't know if people know about the Stoics. I don't know that much about the Stoics, but it basically means a mindset of sort of very parv, everything is fine,
right?
But that's not really what Alter Rebbe says there. The Alter Rebbe is talking about everything is good, everything's happy, everything's joyful. So unconditional happiness. And the unconditional happiness, the Alter Rebbe says, is based on really, really understanding and seeing in your mind that this is the way that I explain it to myself, which, by the way, this is another whole thing, which is getting used to explaining what the text says in words that resonate within my own mind, which everybody has their own mind. So I'm sure that everybody who said this as a mantra has a slightly different version of that mantra playing in their mind. So for me, it's I tell myself, it's not the thing, it's Hashem's goodness dressed up as the thing. Because that's really what the Rebbe is saying. It's not just that Hashem is good, it's the world is made out of the or, the shefa, whatever you want to call it, and that or and shefa is benevolent. It comes from Chachmei Allah, which is the source of Gan Eden. So the same process that Hashem used to make Gan Eden, which is a perfect world, ultimate pleasure, we have no concept even of the pleasure of Gan Eden, made also this cup of water. And made also the germs that are making you sick, or made also the amount of money that you have or don't have. So if something goes wrong, it's like if someone misses a business deal, let's say, so it's not a missed business deal, it's Hashem's goodness dressed up as a missed business deal. Right. My wife and I have been through multiple miscarriages. And something that really helped me with that, this is real stuff, is like, it's not just a miscarriage, it's Hashem's goodness dressed up as a miscarriage. Oh. And you'll see that baby lost a love. It says that the babies that had miscarriages, like the neshama was going through that process, and they'll be there by Tchias HaMesim.
Right.
And that's about the past or the present, and then about the future. You could have the same thing. Well, I could be afraid of that happening again. But I don't want to be afraid of that happening again, because that's a fear of something other than Hashem. So what do I want instead? I want to feel like if it happens, that'll be Hashem's goodness dressed up as that. Meaning if it's a healthy baby, that'll be Hashem's goodness dressed up as that. And if not, that'll be Hashem's goodness dressed up as that. By the way, we have 2 healthy children, by the way, so I have a lot to be grateful for. Just putting that out there. So, so the same with anything, the same in business, the same in, okay, I'm going to try something to improve my shalom bias. And, Baruch Hashem, I have a lot to be grateful for in that area, so I don't think I'm making any big efforts there right now. But I'm saying if someone is working on something in shalom bias, so that particular thing might work, it might not work, but you can go forward with unconditional happiness. By the way, that's probably also going to help. That's also part of what the Rebbe says. When you have this Emunah, that elevates the highest out of that zone where it's creating the hidden good, and turns it into revealed good. So that like is there's more there than a pasuk saying that Hashem is good. You know, it's like a whole perception of reality and how reality is coming to be at every moment out of Hashem's goodness. And if you could learn to not relate a little bit less to the outer layer and relate a little bit more to the pnimius, then you could feel good about it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if we could touch on this topic for a second, even though not to turn the whole podcast into this topic, but why should the person therefore want a certain outcome? If you said before, like stoic, right? Mm-hmm. If everything is taka the same, so then why same good? Yeah. So why should I want a specific outcome?
That's a fantastic question because if I'm happy either way, so then I can sit on my couch and be happy. What's the problem? Right. The answer really becomes this is how you start to get out of yourself a little bit and dedicate yourself to a purpose. Mm. So I could be happy either way, but Hashem has a purpose in certain outcomes, or at least in me putting the effort into those outcomes. Right. And if I'm happy, regardless of the outcome, then I have more mental and emotional space to actually dedicate myself to what He wants. Right. And so Hishtavos is really like, if you look at Tzavas Harivash, it's like one of the first things he talks about. It's actually a very fundamental thing in Avodah. If you take Likutei Amar and Perek Chaf Vav, which is very similar to the Askel Chabina that we just discussed, it's also the same kind of message. We can get into Diukim or whatever, but at Bechlalos, it's also the same message about Gamzu L'Teva, everything is Hashem's goodness dressed up as that. So the reason why the Alter Rebbe brings it up in the Likutei Amarim is to say that you won't really be emotionally available for Avodas Hashem without this.
If you're going to be worrying about things in your life, then you're not going to be able to.
Yeah, like he says, the only way that you could implement everything we spoke about until now, Perek Aleph through Chafei, about winning the war of the Nefesh Elokis over the Nefesh Bahamis, is going to be if you're Bezrizas. And you can only be Bezrizas if you're Besimcha, which involves being Metayar your heart from all Daga ve'etzav ba'elam. And this is the way you do it, by realizing that everything is Hashem's goodness dressed up as that.
Right. So all of a sudden, the happiness is not for you to be okay, not just for you to be okay, because technically you should learn how to be okay with whatever happens in your life, but you should be happy in order to be able to serve Hashem and do what Hashem wants. And I guess same thing with davening for certain outcomes, because you know that Hashem wants that outcome. And maybe sometimes we don't know specifically, and we have to ask a mashpia
Yeah.
and figure out what Hashem wants from us in any given situation. But once we do know what Hashem wants from us in any given situation, we need to be able to want to have that outcome specifically because it's what Hashem wants.
Right.
Even if I were to be happy with the other outcome.
Right. I think in Savas Rivash also the Baal Shem Tov says that type of thing. Like it really should, whether it's there or somewhere else, but that idea of, why daven to Hashem for a certain thing? Daven to Hashem that He should give you what's truly best for you. The Baal Shem Tov says that.
Right. Is that what the Rebbe talks about davening? That you shouldn't ask for a certain outcome?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's something that we can learn from either way. Meaning, like even if the Rebbe would have a slightly different approach.
Right.
But
sorry. Let me clarify. I think there's a difference when it comes to fundamental needs, even al pi Torah in life. Bani chayim zayneh. We're supposed to ask for shells. There's a mitzvah of shel strachov.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Shel strachov doesn't mean whatever Hashem wants for me is best. Shel strachov means what I feel begashmis is better for me, which is, let's use a very elementary example, to be healthy, right? I'm supposed to ask Hashem to be healthy, right? I'm not supposed to ask Hashem like, oh, please let me be able to live whatever life you want me to live, right? Which could include continuing being sick, chas v'shalom.
Right.
It's not a fair hair. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No. It's a great question. I think there's a lot of levels of this. Meaning, like, it's interesting. Like, you have the story of Reb Zusha that the Maggid sent someone to him to learn what it means. To be happy, right?
Right.
But Gashmis, he had a lot of things that we would consider to be surin, but he said, like, what do you mean? I don't know why he sent you to me. Like, I've never suffered a day in my life.
Right.
So, like, I don't know, we can make a whole bilkul now about what are his tzrachav. If that's the way he feels, then what are his tzrachav,
Sure.
But you could also want that thing, like we're saying, like for the kavana of it.
Oh, right.
For the purpose,
Right.
But I don't think, however we exactly answer the question, I don't think this is really the Rebbe's approach, that you should just not be asking for teva nirva negla. That doesn't seem to be the Rebbe's approach. But I think that comes with an awareness also of, like, even the not teva nirva negla is really and truly also Hashem's goodness that you can be happy with.
Right.
Interesting. So like, again, you could daven for your health to be restored, and also know that if chas v'shalom one's health wouldn't be restored, then that would be Hashem's goodness dressed up as their health not being restored, and that changes the way you experience the davening for your health to be restored.
Right. That's the basic distinction.
These are very sensitive topics, obviously.
Sure, 100%. It's but they're real topics. Like, this is the basic distinction between what happened in the past versus Bitachon for the future. Like Emunah, in that whatever happened to me in the past is Hashem's best, versus Bitachon for the future, that the future will be Teva Nerva Nigla. Teva Nerva Nigla means the way I understand it to be good. Yeah. What this conversation, I think, is shedding light on is that, what do you mean the way I understand it to be good? Shouldn't I be able to understand either outcome as good? And here we have the certain clarity of what Hashem wants there to be in the world. Hashem wants you to be healthy. Hashem wants you to have children. Hashem wants you to have money.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. How do we know that, right? Let's money. Bani chayim zayneh is money.
Right.
So how do we know that Hashem wants us to have money? Right?
Well, there's, Dirah B'tachtonim is all about that. We also have the sikha of Truma Tavshin and Beis. Familiar with that sikha? The wealth, the shiras sikha. Everybody's rich. You don't know that you're rich? Is that what you want to talk about?
Is rich or should be rich or can be rich?
All the above.
All the above.
Asher be'etzem, and if you don't see it, then it's because it's your avodah to be megala with your avodah.
Right. So let's say with the premise of that sikha, all of a sudden me asking for money, and even a lot of money, not just like Shabbatachon level of having enough to live.
Yeah.
B'chlal,
Shabbatachon. There's parnasa and ashiras.
Yeah. Exactly. So
I figured out that you see that lashon, that chiluk a lot. There's parnasa and ashiras.
Right. And I think in Shabbatachon, and I think in general in Rishonim, I was recently even learning a Maimer Tzemach, and he talks about very clearly about asking, about figuring out how much you need to be able to live.
Yeah.
That's very limited in the way we view money.
Right.
That's not the way we
need a
view
lot,
money.
but
What?
we do tend to need a lot.
We tend to need a lot and then want more than what we need.
Right.
No, not even to go on luxurious extra vacations per se, but even like to be able to, I don't know, go out to a restaurant or something, like, which is not, I don't think the Tzemach Tzedek is talking about that.
I don't know if they had restaurants back then.
One reason why Tzemach Tzedek is not talking about it, among other reasons.
That's how you read the Tzemach Tzedek? That's interesting.
He talks about if I need Lamoshel, 500 or 600, I think his numbers are ruble for a month. So then working more than that is Adraba, Hedif, and it's Makalkal.
But does that mean mamash to like cut it down to the absolute minimum you need to survive? Is that what he's saying?
I don't know if the absolute minimum, but definitely
you need to go to a restaurant for enhancing shalom bayis. It brings simcha to the house, you know.
Right. So that
all these things. It also depends if you see it as a Avodas Hashem,
right,
the thing that you need the money for, or not. You know.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Like, it's such an example. Would previous generations, for sure in the Rebbe's world, for sure in I'm saying in that sech of Truma, base where the Rebbe talks about, shiros and gold, and for sure you would say that in the perspective that the Rebbe is giving, and the perspective that we're familiar with in the Rebbe's Torah of Harchava, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
they put out a whole sefer about Parnasa Sakim recently.
Of what?
About Parnasa. There's a sefer, there's like similar. I don't know if it's the same people that did it, but similar to like all the Share, all the different topics. Somebody just put out a Parnasa one.
Share Parnasa?
No, it's not called Share Parnasa, but it's the same concept, like of that kind of a liquid.
First of all, I think Share Parnasa would be an excellent title, but
whatever. They didn't ask me what title they should give it, but it's amazing. There's a whole section of the sefer called Ashiras Varchava or Chava Ashiras.
It's based on Chassidus. You're saying it's a liquid from
Chassidus.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a little bit of an interesting topic to go into for a second. But
money's always an interesting topic.
Well, money, yeah, but not just money, but lifestyle. Like you do, it does seem that this would be a very classic difference between the Rebbe's approach on previous generations, previous Rebbeim, previous Chassidim for sure.
Yeah,
Skafia, and very clearly not indulging. Like if a Chassid of the, I don't know, Tzemach Tzedek of the Rebbe Marash came to his mashpia and said, my wife really wants to go to a restaurant, whatever the equivalent of that would be then. I don't know. Take a walk by the water, maybe, right? But like, whatever, it's my time to learn, right? What would the mashpia in that generation say?
I don't know. You would know that better than me.
I don't know. I didn't live there. Why would I know better?
I didn't either.
Well, but we have the concept of iskaf. I mean, whatever, we could talk about like the whole.
But the Rebbe wasn't talking about indulging in that sicha of Truman and Beis. It's not to be rich so you can indulge b'gashmias.
Okay, 1 second. Let's refine and indulge.
Okay.
I don't either mean indulge as in chilagasa and grobkeit. No, the Rebbe is never condoning any of that, for sure not.
Right.
But we're talking about bayis noah, kelim noim, right?
Right.
Let's use that example, bayis noah, right? I mean, the Rebbe is quoting bayis noah marchivet that shalom. I think it's a Gemara, right?
Yeah, right.
Right. It's a Gemara.
It's a chafes shvat and Beis sicha.
Right.
The same idea.
Yeah.
The same family of stuff.
It's
the
a Gemara.
The Navav and Beis is like this. It's that fusion of yeshus and bittul, like we spoke about before.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so imagine that example, because that's what I'm saying. It's the Gemara, so it existed previous to the Rebbe's generation. This saying, this Maimon Chazal.
Right.
So Chassid in Dar Shvi, in Dar Chamishi, in Dar Revi goes to his mashpia and says, "I'm thinking of maybe building a big, nice house." Right.
Yeah.
What would be the response?
It's funny actually. A friend of mine when I was in yeshiva, when we were learning the sicha, he looked up the Maharsha and the Gemara, and the Maharsha actually says that therefore they're not good things. Because
they're not
even that in a bad meaning. It's like it makes you mugushan. I don't know. You have to check the Maharsha, but something like that, meaning the exact opposite of what the Rebbe is saying.
Right. In other words, it's not just another taich. It's like pashut, like the perspective of how we look at that Gemara.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite.
Who said it's a positive thing? Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So, right, or I was actually just thinking, like we are told that our Pinchas, I think was our Pinchas Reizes, I think one of the famous Chassidim Alter Rebbe, he was very wealthy and he had a big house. I believe it was Rabbi Chassidus. And like he said, that why does he have a big house? Because he has a big house, so he's respected. I think he lived in Shklov, I think it was, a big city of the Misnagdim. So therefore he has a say. Therefore the meetings, the Vada Kol, whatever, the meetings are going to happen in his house. Because they're happening in his house, he'll have a say. And because he'll have a say in the Tzorchei Kehila, so that he'll be able to make sure that the Chassidus-aligned or something gets a raise. Mamish, like a very beautiful idea like that. Uh-huh. And that's why he has a big house. So there had to be like the excuse, right? There had to be that excuse. There had to be that like very specific reason why you had a big house. But if a regular chassid was going to go to his mashpia and be like, "Hey, I'm thinking maybe I should get a big house," I don't want to postulate history, but I would imagine that they'll be like, "Whoa, what do you mean, skafia? Like why do you want a big house? Where's it coming from? Probably the Yetzer Hara, maybe marchivin dati shel adam, look up the marsha, like something like that, right?" And
maybe
right, and comes the Rebbe and says, "No, marchivin dati shel adam, in as of itself, it's a way of serving Hashem." Now, again, of course, it can't be fargript. Of course, it can't be indulgence.
Right. I feel like what comes up for me when you say that story is the idea that doing things l'shem shamayim makes all the difference. Like even in eating food, right? Like eating food l'shem shamayim elevates it. You have to know what it means. Now, in order to eat the food l'shem shamayim, you don't just say, "I'm eating the food l'shem shamayim," and it works magic powers. Like you have to actually be a person who has some concept of what it means to eat the food l'shem shamayim and actually be in that space when you eat the food. And then that makes all the difference, whether it's elevating it or denigrating it.
Right.
Whether you're upgrading it or downgrading it. So
right.
the same thing it says different places about money and everything. Like when you use Gashmias l'shem shamayim, you're elevating it. So that's what I hear in that story. Like he had a kavana elokis. He had a reason why in his avodas Hashem he should have a big house, and that was real for him, and then therefore it's fine. But you have to be honest with yourself if that's really what you feel.
Oh, so the Rebbe is not giving a blank check of that everyone should have harchava in all areas unconditionally. The Rebbe is saying that we should all be able to tune in to the real kavana and therefore have the harchava.
I think so. I mean, I don't think the Rebbe. I don't want to say that the Rebbe doesn't want people to have harchava if their kavanas are not perfect. I'm not going to say that.
Right.
Especially because in that sefer there is a piece where the Rebbe spoke about the difference between the earlier Dirah. It's like you see I always wondered, like in Igeres HaKodesh, you read through Igeres HaKodesh, it sounds like everybody's poor, and the Alter Rebbe was telling them that whatever money they have to give it away.
Yeah.
So how does it stem with Truman and Beis? It sounds like two different approaches.
Right.
And now I actually found in that Sefer that the Rebbe addresses it, that like in America it's different. Like obviously the Eibusher is being manning the world in a different way with regard to Shiros, so that makes a difference.
Right. This came in because
before that.
It
came in because what?
Yeah, so this came in because I was saying about like when we talk about Banei Chaim Mezayne and we want to understand how we could have the Bitachon going forward and realizing that this is Hashem's kavana. In other words,
right.
Yeah, that money could be included in that. So okay, whatever. So
the Rebbe's Heira. I was going to answer your question about the Sikha by saying that I think that the Rebbe's Heira it's not just be rich. And the end. It's be rich so that you can. And the Rebbe says a few things there about Menuchas HaNefesh B'Menuchas HaGuf, like doing Torah and mitzvahs B'Menuchas HaNefesh B'Menuchas HaGuf. The Rebbe quotes the Rambam Menuchas Tshuva that talks about Hashem giving us more harchava so we can do more mitzvahs. The Rebbe says giving a lot of tzedakah, doing mitzvahs behider, lifnim hider, $500 esregim. They go up to $500.
Oh yeah.
Like having the most expensive tefillin, the most expensive, not the most expensive, but the most mahuder, which is naturally the most expensive. Right. Fully investing in making your home a mishkan mikdash l'Hashem, which can mean investing in the actual home. It can mean investing in what's going on in the children's lives. It can mean investing in the shalom bayis. Like the Heira of the Sikha is based on the Mishkan. The idea of the Mishkan is you take the gold from Mitzrayim and use it for the Mishkan. So it's not like be rich and we'll think about what to do about it. It's be rich so that you can serve Hashem more b'shleimus. That's the Heira.
So I think to tie it back.
And the Rebbe's promise is that Hashem is vadai giving the bracha for you to be successful in making that happen. Vadai, mevarich, like that word vadai stands out to me.
Right. So again, I mean that what we just said about like, yeah, the Rebbe is also giving like a blank check to everyone. Everyone should be rich, and part of it is like every Yid should be rich, period, and we'll figure out to make sure that it's all good. You know, I don't want to say after, but like we'll figure that part out. But every Yid deserves to be rich, and then like in other words, I think anyone who learns that Sikha comes out with that message, and maybe it's not wrong that like, oh, the Rebbe is saying that every Yid should be rich, period. But you can't ignore the fact that it's a whole sikha, and it's a whole sikha explaining about why a Yid needs to be rich, why it should be rich.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, mitzad obviously Yisrael, like
exactly,
like
another
Yid's gashmias is my ruchnias, so like I'm not supposed to be making cheshbonos about other people having less gashmias.
Correct.
You know? But I do think that the mindset that the Sikha is teaching, I'm sure the Rebbe wants everybody to have Harchava B'Gashmias regardless of what their intentions are.
Exactly.
And also, I think that the message of the Sikha is go be rich because of the Avodas Hashem that will come through it.
Correct. Yeah.
Which involves you being in the mindset, like you being that type of person that if I would have more money. It's like an interesting cheshbon nefesh a person could do, going back to self-awareness. It's like, am I the type of person that if my income would be 10x somehow, that good things would happen from that? Because it's not, you know, you hear these stories about people in Hollywood, you know, you just waste all the money. Like people make millions and then waste it, and then they end up drunk and on drugs and whatever. Like it's not necessarily a bracha. It really depends on who you are before you get that money.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah, it's the statistics of people who win the lottery and then lose it very quickly. Everyone knows those statistics, especially when they win the lottery, and yet it still happens to most of those people. So
maybe Hashem and His goodness is waiting for us to be the type of person that it's for sure going to be good for us to have the money, and that's when He'll give it to us.
Right.
Maybe that's one component of the Avodah.
Especially to understand the past. But in other words, to be able to come to terms how me not having money necessarily till now was for the good.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, but
that was Hashem's goodness being dressed up as you not having money.
Exactly.
Now, if you don't mind my saying that.
Yeah.
Hopefully you trust me enough that I can say that.
We went on a tangent about the money piece and like comparing it to previous generations, the Rebbe's view, which, you know, is always an interesting idea, and I think this could be a full topic for itself, how to resolve a lot of the paradoxes that we find between previous generations in Chassidus and these generations. I mean, there's blatant steers in Chassidus, things that the earlier Rebbeim have said, and not only our Rebbe versus the other Rebbeim, Chas Shalom, even like, I'm saying it's nothing to do with like our Rebbe versus the other Rebbeim. It's even, you know, you read from the Middle Rebbe to the Rebbe Shab, and there's different Eissprachen, even in like, I was recently just listening to something about Rabbi Shais Taub, his Sikha this week, his share on the Sikha this week about the beer of Esav. He goes into the different Marmakaimis, says about the beer of Yishmael. And like there's like open steers between, I think it was the Middle Rebbe and the Rebbe Shab or something like that. So
sounds cool.
Yeah. So in other words, it's a good topic for itself, and I think everyone appreciates that there's this concept of the different kufas and the different Rebbeim. But to put that tangent aside, I think what's emerging from here to tie it back is when you were talking before about Frum Greatness. So like a thought that came to my mind, which I know the answer, and just bringing out the question is like, Frum Greatness, really? Like, whoa, like we're supposed to be great? Like, isn't that Gaiva? Isn't that like you said before, Yeshus, Tzias? And the answer, of course, is that it's from greatness. It's the greatness that's
exactly the idea.
Yeah, it's the.
I almost didn't hire Ari Weinstein as a coach because he talked about greatness on his website. It was that close to ruining my entire life over the word greatness.
Interesting, good. And then you were able to incorporate that into your.
And I spoke to him about it afterwards. Like, I feel like I like this message of greatness, but and then it hit me from greatness. It's like the light of the moon, not the light of the sun. You know. It's reflecting Hashem's greatness.
Right.
That's from greatness.
Exactly. So from greatness means that the greatness of Hashem, the greatness of Torah, and therefore the greatness that Hashem and Torah want from you. Right. Yeah. So again, forget about the money bit between the previous generations and not. The Rebbe is telling us that our kavana, the kavana that we have to make a Dirah B'tachtonim, and therefore to have a very good life, begashmis and beruchnis and benefesh and emotionally and psychologically and all that. So all that means that you should have good things going for you And therefore, you should want those good things and ask for them. So yes, there's the hashva piece of, if it doesn't happen like that, then I'm happy with that also. And I could even think about the future. Could theoretically think about the future. This is a whole new vart. I could theoretically think about think about the future that I still won't be happy. I still won't be rich, and I still won't be healthy, chas shalom, whatever, etc. And I know that I could be happy about that, but I could still want and demand and ask and daven for health and wealth and all that, because I know that this is ultimately what Hashem wants.
Right.
And if Hashem doesn't give it to me, that's His business.
Right.
But I know that going forward, this is what Hashem wants from me.
100%.
So this is, I mean, I know that this question comes up a lot in Bitachon and Tefillah. This question, this contradiction of like, if I really believe that everything Hashem wants is good, so why do I even need to daven for certain outcomes? Mm-hmm. This is a whole vart of the answer, which is Hashem's kavanah. You could be happy, but what does Hashem want?
Right.
And Hashem wants you to be happy in the sense that, like, what you think your Nefesh Bahamis wants, that's what Hashem wants. Okay,
100%.
That's very eye opening.
To me, the easiest way to see it is, one of my favorite sichas, which I also have a short podcast episode about, is Simchas Torah Tafshin and Beis. It's a very short sicha. You see, I'm into Tafshin and Beis, where the Rebbe says this idea over there that we should greet Mashiach, which means that our day-to-day life should look like a me'en v'dugma of the day-to-day life of Bnei Yisrael Salave, or in Yemais Mashiach, same idea. So basically, I actually see that sicha as kind of like the klal of all the later herois that come in Beis, like the Sashiras, for example. And the Rebbe says that this is a hira of Simchas Torah, and it should be nimshach all the whole year. So in other words, there's an avodah of make your life a me'en v'dugma of the life of Yemais Mashiach. That's an avodah. You're also going to enjoy it because Yemais Mashiach is going to be awesome for you. Mm-hmm. But that's an avodah.
Right.
Like Hashem wants that. Hashem wants that for whatever moments we're still in Galus, which those moments have now extended for over 30 years. Since the Rebbe said this hira, that's part of what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
So when you think of it that way, it's like, well, what's it going to be like in Yemais Mashiach? In Yemais Mashiach, everyone's going to have everything. And you're also not going to be nitfas in the gashmis at all. You're going to have more gashmis than you could dream of, and also not be so into it. You're going to be into it less than you could dream of.
Right.
Like the Rebbe says, kol hamadan and mitzuyim ka'afar doesn't only mean that they're going to be plentiful like dust. It's also like mitzuyim could mean like chashuvim. They're going to be like valued like dust.
Right.
So you'll have all of it, but it won't be so important to you. That doesn't mean you won't enjoy it. I don't think it just means it won't be your priority because you'll be so deeply engaged in a relationship with Hashem that won't feel so important.
Right. Or maybe to tie it back, maybe it means that you're going to be engaged in it, but not because of the way you think of it now as a pleasure in as of itself, but you're going to be engaged in it because it's what Hashem wants. Yeah. And that's the way to do it nowadays also. That's the avodah, how to engage with Kashmis now also.
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that? You mentioned that you're into Nalfman Beis.
Sure.
So the reason why I'm going to pick on that is because it comes out from our conversation. Forget about me knowing you before this, but just from this conversation, I think anyone listening to this conversation could appreciate that you have a very, Baruch Hashem, you have a very strong ability to crystallize and make relevant the point and the message and the guiding principle of what Chassidus is coming to give us in any specific given Maimer, Sicha, etc. So in Nalfan and Beis, anyone who's touched the Nalfan and Beis knows that those are actually sometimes the most abstract and like vague, mysterious. They come across that way. Like
we can experience them that way, I would say.
Right. There are people that might.
There is a thought that could occur to a Jewish person. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. That these are like not practical and like not practical in the sense of like that there's nothing for me to take out of it, but like very deep and very like the Rebbe's like changing reality and like telling us, not telling us, but like showing us, talking about a reality that's seemingly not the reality. Talking about the way it's good, like you just mentioned, talking about the way it's going to be when Mashiach comes and making us feel it now, or telling us that we should feel it now. how does that become relevant? How does that I mean, there's I think I know the answer in an escapist kind of way of like, yeah, if you imagine everything from a Gula perspective, so then you're not going to suffer with anything, and you're not going to view anything as a problem, right? I could get that, but I'm sure there's more depth to it, which is not just as like, oh, in the Geula there's not going to be any problems, so therefore force yourself to feel that there's no problems now. I'm sure there's something more than just that. And again, I'm not even like asking as much to turn this into a sheer in an alpha and a base versus what got you attracted to an alpha and a base. For what I understand, this was like even of the earlier stage of your attraction to Chassidus.
Sure. What personally got me into it, I'll tell you, a big part of my journey from very early on was the idea of truth-seeking. Going back to one of the guest speakers who came to speak at this Litvish Kiruv program, there was a guest speaker that they brought who touched, I would say he like touched my heart more than anything else. I know there was a lot of good stuff there that touched my heart, but this is like something that became like my foundation in my mind for like a very long time, is the idea of truth-seeking, which is like, on one foot, we want to know the accurate description of reality. He gave this example, like if you as a kid, you walked into a bank and you see a line of people going and giving money to the bank teller, and you misunderstand what's going on. He said it much better than I'm saying it. But if you misunderstand what's going on, it looks like everybody's just giving their money to this person. There's a person who gets to stand there and just collect all the money. So a kid might think, oh, I want to be a bank teller because then I just get to have all this money. Not in like a bad way. I'm not saying it right. But you get what I'm saying. If you have an inaccurate description of reality, you think that it's the bank teller's money. So then you pursue one thing. If you have an accurate description of reality, you'd pursue something very different. And he brought it out in many, very powerful ways. And his main message ultimately was to look for the truth in terms of like, just because you were brought up secular, or if somebody was even brought up Christian, or however they might have been brought up, seek the truth. Like, just because you were born into a certain thing, it doesn't mean that that's the truth. I guess a lot of people listening to this podcast happen to have been born into the truth, but a lot of people weren't, obviously. So seek the truth, right? And that was a big part of what motivated me to not just do a few mitzvahs and whatever, but to really go all the way with Yiddishkeit. And then the next question on my mind, because I was involved in both Chabad and Litvish Yiddishkeit, was, is there a truth within Yiddishkeit itself? So I think a lot of people who are involved in Kiruv, let's say, will say, like, whatever Derech and Avodas Hashem speaks to you, that's what your neshama is meant to do. There's no, like, okay, we're going to get politically incorrect over here. There's no one Derech which is more the truth than another Derech.
Right.
But comes the Rebbe, and there's a whole lot of stuff that the Rebbe says that seems to be saying that this is not just another derech. This is something special. Yeah. Chassidus Chabad, learning on the Torah and Chassidus. I saw a sikha once. I think it's somewhere in Alf Trudal. Maybe you'll get to it in your shir. That the Rebbe says the whole machlekes of Shittas Chabad and Shittas Pailin is only now, but Lasalava, everybody will be moeded to Shittas Chabad because everyone's going to be Malar Steis Hashem. I think the Rebbe says something like that. There's a lot of stuff from the Rebbe that says, hey, this is not just another derech on the Avodas Hashem. This is something special, right? And that really bothered me for a while. And so there was like truth seeking within Yiddishkeit itself, and obviously that led me to go into Chassidus, and then within Chassidus, there's different camps about certain questions, right? So what about that? What about that? What about that? And that led me to want to pursue the truth all the way to the end. And part of that was the idea of like, when you're learning in yeshiva and you see that you're learning Shuvah Yisrael Ranat, and that tells you to serve Hashem in one way, and then you're learning Sikha from the Rebbe, and that tells you to serve Hashem a different way, and then there's a Farbrengen going on that's telling you a different way, and so every week you're learning 3 different ways of serving Hashem, and like, where am I supposed to put my focus? How do you organize it all and know like what you're really meant to do? So I was really, the years that I was in yeshiva, I was really like thirsting for that clarity of like, how am I really supposed to know? I guess now I would say the best guess that I could take at what Hashem really wants me to do. And I started figuring out different things. First of all, the idea of each Rebbe being a tekufa, I'm not going to be myrich about that. I think that's a relatively easy one. But then you discover the idea of there being tekufos in the Rebbe's Nesias itself. The Rebbe talks about a chafei shvat and beis, mishpatim and beis. There's a sikha of Holdes Tafshin Nun, where the Rebbe says the Nun should be nisim compared to what was before that. Mishpatim and beis, the Rebbe actually says every year is like one of the Mem Beis Masais in the Midbar, from Tafshin Yud to Tafshin Nun Beis, which is interesting because that makes it sound like there's a chiddush of Nun Beis even Lagabe Nun Aleph. But so that idea of tekufos kind of led me like, okay, well, I want to get like the most up-to-date software, so to speak, like you want the most up-to-date version. That's how you're going to get the best answer.
Right.
And I think we all kind of intuitively know this because like nobody would say, what year did the Rebbe come out with Rambam Tafshin Dal Mem?
Yeah.
So nobody would say like, something, I'm only holding by like Tafshin Chaf Gimel, so I'm not going to learn Rambam,
Right. Or
the Rebbe only came out with Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin at whatever time that was.
Lamed something, yeah.
So I'm a chassid of the Rebbe from before then. So I don't put on Rabbeinu Tams and I don't buy Rabbeinu Tams for my kids.
Right.
Like we don't do that. Like everybody understands that we don't do that.
Right.
So to me, like Nanaf Nabez is the same thing. It's trickier because a couple of reasons. I think one reason it's trickier is a shorter time. Also, the differences are not like these very gashmistic different, not gashmis, but I'm saying very pil mamistic Rambam and not Rambam, Rabbeinu Tam, not Rabbeinu Tam.
Right.
But it's more in hashkafa, it's more in midas, it's more subtle. But there's very real stuff over there, like avodas haberurim being finished or avodas haberurim not being finished. Well, what does that mean? So to me, I'm like in my truth-seeking mindset that was instilled in me from back then, like. It's like if the Rebbe is saying that avodas haberurim is finished, there's probably a reason why the Rebbe is saying that. There's probably some difference in avodah, and if there is, I want to understand it, because if avodas haberurim is finished and that makes a difference in what Hashem wants for me, and how my life is supposed to look, then I want the later version. I want the post avodas haberurim version, not the pre avodas haberurim being finished version.
Wow.
And when I learned the sichas. I don't learn like the Devar Malchus Sichos like every week or anything, but when the years that I was very involved in learning them, I was kind of like, okay, you're right, they could be very abstract and a lot of connecting this and that and the date and the week and the parsha and that, right? But there's also like, if you look at, usually I would say like the beginning of the Sikha and the end of the Sikha. First of all, a lot of the Sikhas, I actually only realized this later on, a lot of the Sikhas, Eis Aleph, the Rebbe actually says we're going to come out with the Heira that connects this.
Mm-hmm. Leaves the map. He gives you the...
Yeah, but the fact that we're going to come out with a Heira. In other words, what if the Sikha is a Heira? That's what the Sikha is, in a way.
Right. I think we all understand that going in. So, just like any Sikha, that there's going to be a Heira at the end.
Okay.
I think in often Beis Heiras themselves are sometimes like a little bit more like... like you said before, Ashkafa oriented or...
Right.
Therefore feeling less relevant.
Okay.
Okay,
that's interesting. I was thinking of a different... I thought you were saying something else, which is it doesn't sound like there's that much...
Focus on Ira at all?
Yeah.
No.
I thought that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
So in that case, like, basically what I would do was... I look at it kind of like learning halacha versus learning Gemara. So like you can know a halacha where you know the whole shakha, the whole sugya that led up to that halacha, or you can know the halacha, or anywhere in between.
Right.
If you read the halacha in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, you're going to have one... I'm thinking of all our conversations about Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. You're going to have one level of knowledge. If you're going to read it with the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, you're going to have a different level of knowledge. If you learn from the Gemara through the Rishonim, right? So there's all kinds of various levels of background knowledge you might have about any given Heira. But I want to understand the Heira. So what I would do is like, because the sikhas are long, and at that time I was trying to do it every week, I would learn the sikha, I would say like very legirsa, to get the overall themes and whatever. I wouldn't try to master every connection and whatever. And then when you get to the part where you see that it's the Hayra L'Poel, or it's the especially in this generation, or especially in this year, or like any of those things that the Rebbe says again and again, slow down. Learn that part really, really well. I would underline, and I would learn it with the sefer that they have of the Pianuchim, which brings, what is the Rebbe quoting?
Right.
I was all the time bringing these sources. What are the sources?
Right.
Sometimes they're not that complicated.
Right.
And when I did that, I just felt like there are things there that are different and like highly relevant. I could give a couple of simple examples if you want. But it's like this is different. There's stuff here that I don't know that it says it anywhere else, or maybe it says it a little bit, but here it became the Mishnah Acharayna, so to speak.
Right. For sure, I had one example.
A simple example. Okay, have you heard anywhere in Chassidus that there is have you seen any other mimer or sikha, not from the Naftan Beis, which says that you should do a form of hisbonenus where you're envisioning what the Geula is going to be like, and that is elevating your whole Avodas Hashem, that's elevating your Limud Torah, your Shleisha Kavin, Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasadim. Is that something that comes up in like any Maimarim that you're aware of?
Right. Doesn't sound familiar.
So in the Sikha V'Eschan and Tavshin and Aleph, the Rebbe talks about exactly that. The Rebbe says, Mistakel b'shleisha devarim. The Rebbe's learning out of that Pirkei Avos. And the Rebbe teaches there, obviously non-literally, shleisha devarim as the third Geula, the third Beis HaMikdash, and to be mistakel at it, and through that, like, arouse a desire for it, and that will elevate your whole Avodas Hashem. And the Rebbe says, "Ve'inat haba lidei avera." You won't come to any averas, like in any of the shalosh kavim, and not even lidei avera, not even taivas heter. So looking at the Geula became an eitzah for taivas heter. It's like, what, I've given a shir on it if anybody wants to actually like hear just the shir on that part of the sikha. But that's what I would do when I would give Mashiach shirim years ago. That's the type of shir that I would give. Like, let's focus on this part and see that there's something really new over here.
Okay, so 1 second. So can I interrupt? So that's on an academic level, right? That's on an academic level, right? So we appreciate academically the chiddush of the sikha and the fascinating type of hayrat the Rebbe is giving here. But now, not relevance? What's the practical implementation of that? How does that look? What does that mean to be mistakel? Meaning, I'm not familiar with that sikha per se to say that, like, maybe the Rebbe himself spells it out over there. But I would imagine that it's not extremely spelled out in, like, what does that mean to be mistakel in the way that the Geula is? How would you explain that? Like, how do you drive that point home?
I would love to actually look at it, which obviously we're not going to do now.
Okay.
But just because it's not super fresh in my mind, every detail. But one thing that the Rebbe does say over there, which this goes back to the idea of looking at the footnotes, there's a footnote there which refers to Shulchan Aruch when the Rebbe talks about histaklos. So, me just learning the Sikha, I didn't know what sif of Shulchan Aruch it was referring to. When I learned it with the Pianuchim, or if anybody just opens up the Sefer, you see that it's talking about Birkas Kainim. And the Alter Rebbe talks about why do we cover our faces with the talis by Birkas Kainim? Because there's an isser to be mistakel, for the Kainim to be mistakel to the people, or for the people to be mistakel at the Kainim. And it says, Aval Re'iyah ba'alma mutter. But still we cover our talis. We don't do Re'iyah either, basically. We don't glance either. But there's a difference in halacha between histaklos and Re'iyah. I'm sure I can think of other halachas also where there's that difference. So histaklos is focused, prolonged gazing, right? We find also this lashon of histaklos in other places in Chassidus that talk about hisbonenus, like Perek Gimel of Tanya, the hisbonenus associated with Tiferes is histaklos b'kar demalka. It also talks about it in Kunshas Tefillah. Right at the beginning, there's a whole piece about histaklos. So histaklos is like a form of deep hisbonenus where you're like gazing in your mind's eye at something.
Right.
Now, when you learn Kunshas Tefillah and it talks about histaklos, it's talking about histaklos at, I don't remember exactly right now, but something of Seder Shtalshalos, right? Something of Elikos, something Ruchni. So you're gazing in your mind's eye at something that is not of this world and trying to generate emotions based on that. And the Rebbe is saying, use that same kayach of histaklos, of focused thought, focused gazing, focused hisbonenus, and not casual, not re'iyah, histaklos, at the geula. So, yeah, the Rebbe doesn't necessarily like break that down into so many details, but like I think the point is, I think Chassidim always had an understanding that there's a certain element of the Rebbe says to do something, we figure out how. There's definitely stories about that. I remember I was in shul one time, somebody told a story like that, and somebody was like, Aryeh, that's mamash your Indian. Like we have to be willing to figure out how. Like if the Rebbe said to do that, then it's not a practical thing. We have to have that hanacha. The Rebbe doesn't tell us to do things that are not practical things.
For sure.
So then, okay, so I'm going to try to sit and spend time being misbeinin. You want to do 30 seconds, a minute, or whatever you want to do. But try it out. Try to be misbeinin at the Beis Hamikdash Shalishi. And whether that means the Gashmis Beis Hamikdash Shalishi, if you want to look at the physical picture, if you want to learn about the inyan of the Beis Hamikdash Shalishi and how it's the which is actually what that whole Sikha is about, is the Mila of the Beis. That's why it comes at the end of the Sikha, because the Rebbe explains how the Beis Hamikdash Shalishi is the idea of Blikvul that has the Milas of both the first and second Beis Hamikdash, and that's why it's actually better that we went into Golus so that we could get that. So it comes behemshik to the whole Sikha actually. So actually, now that I'm talking about it, I'm remembering that if you just learn the Sikha in order, then the Rebbe actually just gave you a lot to be misbeinin on about the third Beis Hamikdash. So if a person sits and does that, the Rebbe is telling you, the Rebbe is not giving you a script, and the Rebbe is not telling you how much time and those kind of details. Maybe it's better that the Rebbe doesn't, because maybe that's personal, because they need to say in Shabbos. Like you have to be willing to play around with your own mind, and like we were saying before, like figure out what clicks in your mind.
Right.
But the Rebbe is giving you that Hirah. You could have that Hashem-based self-confidence that with the Hirah comes in Sinas Koyach, and if you try to do it and you don't give up, it'll go.
Right.
And you'll be able to really significantly elevate your life by gazing in your mind at the third Beis Hamikdash and at the Geula.
Wow.
So that doesn't. Yeah, I did see a Sikha from the Friedrich Rebbe, and I think the night of Pesach and Tafshin Gimel, where the Friedrich Rebbe says something about imagining every detail of how the Geula is going to be, or something like that. There might be precursors to it, but it's not like that.
Sure.
That was the classic Derech and Avoda. Right. And here the Rebbe keeps saying, if you put together the Sfas Chanan that I just spoke about and Simchas Torah that I spoke about a few minutes ago, you have there two sources that are different ways that the Rebbe is saying it, but they're both look at the Geula and either desire it or be striving in that direction, or model your life after that. You know what I mean? So that to me is a very clear, simple, obvious new thing in Avodah. I don't think it is in the Hamshach Samavav, and it's not an insult to have the Hamshach Samavav.
Right. So interesting. So make sure I don't lose the track. So you're saying that what got you, what attracted you to Naflin Beis?
Better keeping track of the flow.
It's the job of the host.
I'm going with my stuff.
What attracted you to Naflin Beis, you're saying, was that you said truth seeking, of finding, of knowing that this is going to give you the most, like what you said, an updated version, updated software.
Yeah.
Most updated focus of what we should be thinking about, of what we should be, the principles that we should be applying to our lives.
Right.
Wow.
And it also goes back to that idea of if there's a spiritual reality, like I was saying, part of what drew me to Chabad in the first place is that we're saying that there's a spiritual reality that a Rebbe sees and that you don't see, and we want to align ourselves with that. So that applies to there being 10 spheres, that also applies to Avodas Habarurim being a thing, and that also applies to Avodas Habarurim being finished.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's where I saw this going, that this is it's very fascinating how, like you said in the beginning, this is what attracted you to Chassidus. There's the why did you care about the spiritual reality? What's wrong with just living the most physical reality in the deepest way possible? And the answer is because there's truth, because there's something beyond.
Right, I guess
I see that. I see a very strong parallel. I see a very strong connection to that. So, what I think emerges from all this is the ideas of, let's call it Frum Greatness, because this is your plug. The idea Frum Greatness is really the firm belief that the principles that Torah and specifically Chassidus talk about are guiding principles for a person's life, are the way that are the formulas how a person is going to be able to live their most successful life. And all of a sudden, any individual struggle, and yes, you might need help, and you probably need help with the mashpia and the life coach, and whoever it is, of showing you and helping you connect the dots of how this problem connects to this core principle. Like we said before, maybe about uncovering why it's fear that's getting you into this specific dilemma. But once a person has the clarity of for sure what the problem is, but also what they should be thinking about, then all of a sudden it becomes aligned with the principles that Chassidus was telling us the whole time. with the messages that Chassidus was giving us the whole time. In that, I think that what emerged from this conversation is that, like, of course, we could talk about the avodah of Chassidus, and it's very obvious when Chassidus talks about, believing in Hashem, knowing that Hashem is all good, knowing that you're a neshama, you have a neshama connection to Hashem. So there, it's very clear how those are guiding principles in my life, because those are inyanim in avodah. But even when you're learning inyanim in haskala of Chassidus, we also had a little bit of a short-lived, but we had a kvias in Rabina at one point together.
Oh, yeah, that was good.
Yeah, right. So talk about the Mittler Rebbe, splitting hairs in haskala. Talk about the Mittler Rebbe like going where 5 steps beyond where like we would regularly have a conversation, right? So. Right. Yeah, what are the guiding principles there? Like, what's the kind of point of that in terms of teaching a person how to live life? But and that's a fair question. We could start a whole new topic about this.
Right.
And go ahead. But like, I think that one point that already emerged was because this is the truth. Because this is the truth. So you want to know about the truth, and down the line, the truth will give you the principles of how to apply to your life, if you're interested in it, which you should be, which hopefully you are.
For sure.
But the conversation is going to be about going what we said in the beginning of the conversation about chakira elikis, limud elikis, because it's the truth, because this is the real reality.
Right. Yeah, and obviously the higher you go in Seder Shnashos, the more removed from the world. Like, I think the more thought it might take to bridge that gap. That's why I mentioned before the Hayom Yom of Vav Tevis. It specifically mentions, like, basically no matter how high you go, it's all part of Dan Salkei Avicha Vav De'eh B'Lev Shalem. So I think the first thing is, like, to have that hanacha, sort of similar to what I just said about the stakos of the Beis Mikdash. Like, if you're going to learn Imre Bina, there is something there that's going to affect your heart. It might be in a different way than a different sefer. Actually, if you learn the introduction to Imre Bina, it's very clear that that he's going for an expansion of your mind and heart and the avodah.
Right. In other words, not just mind, also heart.
Yeah. Like, he goes to, I don't have the oasis clear in my head right now, but about tshuva problems. But he basically goes through the part of davening of Avos Eilam, like the Achil of Avenu, like all that. Says like that's the goal of Imre Bina, basically. That tefillah that we daven every day of Avos Eilam, when we ask Hashem to make our mind stronger and we should know Him more and we should feel more Ava and Yir and everything. That's the goal of Imre Bina. But it comes in a different way. I think it's there's a difference between the way that a maskil in Chassidus, not like Haskalah, like a maskil experiences Chassidus and an Oived. And I'm not a big bucky in these things, and definitely not in Haskalah. Like, if anything, I would say I'm more in the kav of being an Oived, I think. But like, if you actually understand Elokus, then it does change your experience. You know what I mean? It's hard to say that to someone, like, oh, if you really understand this, then it'll be powerful. But it does. Like we learned it together. Like, it was very powerful and uplifting, even though it wasn't actually talking about anything related to life. Right. You know what I mean? In that sense. So it's like, if you could maintain that awareness more of the time, if you were going into that space that we were feeling when we were learning about Echad and Yachid and the pratim of the Yechida and sorry, I don't know what's with me. Those abstract stuff. Like, if you would feel that every day because you're learning Imre Bina every day, that would elevate your day.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, Imre Bina was written for Yikosio Lippler, who was a big Oived.
Right.
Is the whole Chiddush that became such a maskil that Imre Bina could be written for him. So there's no way. There's no way that Imre Bina could be irrelevant. That's not possible. So if you go in with that hanacha, you're much more likely to find some kind of relevance, either through experiencing something profound or actually saying, okay, now what am I taking away from this learning of Imre Bina? Right. In other words, sometimes the Maimer does it for you, and that's what we call like the Avodah Dekamarim. And sometimes you have to do that, and that's what we call the Haskalah Dekamarim. Yeah. But I think what this conversation shed light on was that when you have that hanacha, when you have that Frum Greatness mindset of the Torah is giving us the formula how to be great in every area, and every area of Torah is giving us that formula. Yeah. So then it will happen
either the Maimer itself or you will make it happen, that it will become relevant.
100%. You have to go with the hanacha. There's nothing in Torah that's irrelevant. That has to be like mufrach legamri. Like that doesn't even make any sense. You know, people say that about Nanaf and Beis also. Again, a yid could have a thought.
Right.
You know, like the Rebbe's telling us these things about Avodas Habarurim being finished, but we don't understand them. It's like that hanacha to me is. I'm sorry, but that hanacha is off. Like the hanacha has to be that the Rebbe is telling us something that it's important.
Right. And not just important, that it's possible to understand.
It's important, it's possible to understand,
relevant.
it's possible to internalize.
Right.
Yeah, and it makes a difference in some way. Even if that way is perception. Okay, so it makes a difference in your perception.
Sure.
That's also important.
Sure.
You know, that's also real.
Right.
Actually, my interest in learning Rabbina when we did that was because the Rebbe speaks in Bitachon and Beis about starting to do Avodas Hameichin, which is, it's like Las Alavei, like it's not just going to be you're going to feel Hashem, you're going to know Hashem, that the Shleimus, you know. Mm-hmm. So that was my personal interest in learning Rabbina at that time. I don't know if I mentioned that at the time.
I don't remember it now. I don't remember you saying that. So there you have a practical.
So it was an expression of the simplest Torah and Beis, make your life a me'in v'dugma of Las Alavei and Avodas you know. That we don't only learn. I mean, it's actually funny. The whole thing of Avodas Hameichin is that we're going to learn not only l'tzarech bir amidus, but also for the sake of just the expansion of the mind itself. That itself tells you that the rest of the time it was always supposed to be l'tzarech avodas amidus, which means it was always supposed to be relevant.
Right. I think he uses the lashon of das al ke'avicha, just for das al ke'avicha, not for avdei b'leiv shalim.
Where does it say that?
There's a Chol Benayach. No, maybe not in that Sikha. In Chol Benayach, Mimalf, I think it's a Maimer look at. I'm not just trying to throw Marokkains, but like over there he connects the what it says in Tanya about Dr. Rebbe time we just had it recently of that learning Chassidus, learning about Mitzias Shtalshalos is Mitzvah Rama V'Nisa, and then the Umavil Alev Shalim.
Right.
So the Rebbe showed that those two things are there's the way that Chassidus affects the Bir Amidus, which is Mevil Shalom, but then beyond that there's the way that Chassidus is just as a mitzvah Rama V'Nisa, and in a way that's the Iker. The Rebbe says pretty clearly there that that's the Iker of Chassidus. The Iker of Chassidus is that you're learning about mitzvah. You're being Isaac in a mitzvah Rama V'Nisa. It's not about being Mevil Shalom.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, this ties with what you're saying about that. There's that inherently moichin by it. Moichin is supposed to be the moichin by itself.
Yediyas Hashem is a mitzvah, right? There are mitzvahs the same way there are mitzvahs you do with your hands. There's mitzvahs you do with your brain,
right? And you're saying that what the Rebbe says if there's that loss of love, that's going to be the ikar focus. You're saying that's what the moichin are. That's
whether it's the ikar or whether it's just that it's expanded to include that in a way that it wasn't before. But yeah, I mean, bira amidus las alave seems like it's going to be pretty quick, like ruach hatuma aver min aretz. I don't know how much bira amidus there's going to be.
Right.
But yeah, malah aretz deas Hashem, like kol ha'elam lo yeh kol ha'elam ala das Hashem b'lvad. Right. It's going to be a deeper and deeper knowledge of Hashem. That's going to be a big part of what's going on.
Right.
So that's actually a whole nother conv separate from this whole conversation, which is like, can we learn to appreciate just knowing Hashem? Just gaining knowledge of Hashem.
Can we learn to appreciate that? Meaning, can we have a shaykhs to that now? Is that what you're asking? Can we know Hashem? Is that what you're asking?
Well, when you learn Chassidus, you're learning about Spheris, you're learning about Elokus, you're getting to know Hashem. Right. Like Elokus is not something separate from Hashem. That's the whole idea of Elokus. Is that it's not the essence of Hashem, but it's of Hashem. Right. You know, it's like I give the example. Like if I get to know how you feel about a certain thing that happens in yeshiva, let's say, okay, that's not the essence of you, but it's part of you. Or at least it's part of you the way you are right now. Mm-hmm. So if I get to know that part of you, then I'm getting to know you. Mm-hmm. So the same thing is with Hashem. So if I learn about Chesed of Atzilus, so it's not the essence of Hashem, but it's not Hashem. Right. So then I'm learning about Hashem when I'm learning that. So, like one approach is to say, okay, now what does that have to do with me? Right. And another approach is to say, I don't even need it to do. I don't need it to have anything to do with me because I'm just getting to know Hashem and how Hashem works, how Hashem runs the world. You know. Right. There's value in both of those. Right. It seems that what the Rebbe says in that Maimer that I quoted before, that the first and foremost description of Chassidus is mitzvah Rama V'Nisa, that it's a lofty pursuit in as of itself, besides for what it affects you. I wonder if this is one of those Chidushim of like the Rebbe versus the earlier
In a way, it seems so. I mean, it's showed you after, like the exact wording of it, but
because it sounds like the opposite of this Hayim Yem of Tevis.
Of that, everything of Dalkis Gavicha is supposed to be for Avdei B'Lev Shalim.
Yeah,
sure. The Frierdiker Rebbe has expressions from today till tomorrow about how everything Chassidus needs to have the Ubechin and everything needs to have the effect on making the person a better person.
Right.
Sure.
Rebbe, in Tafshin Yud, I remember one of the Sikhs, the Rebbe says that there was somebody who asked the Frierdiker Rebbe 2 questions. One of them had something to do with Malachim. I forgot if the Rebbe said what the other one is. And the Rebbe answered his other question because it was negate his Avodah. And the question about Malachim, the Frierdiker Rebbe didn't answer because it wasn't negate his Avodah.
Right.
So there seems to be more of that cop. Like,
sure.
If it's not for your Avodah, then what are you getting involved in it for?
Right.
I don't know if that was all the time, but it seems like there's more of that. And maybe this is one of the ways that the Rebbe is preparing us for Las Lava is pointing that out. I don't know.
Right. And then we went back to the Mittler Rebbe to see how that existed by the Mittler Rebbe also already, like just in a way, like the pursuit of lofty levels and hair-splitting levels of Seder Shtalshalos.
Right.
In as of itself.
Certain Chassidim, it seems like certain ones of these ideas you see by like great Chassidim, like kind of like you were saying before about the big house.
Right. Right.
You can see Lippler as like, he's the one that the Alter Rebbe cut off a part of his Yetzer Hara. You know what I'm talking about?
He got a bracha, something, no?
There's a story that, there's a few stories about him. One, the Rebbe says in the Torah and Chassidus that the Alter Rebbe wanted to give him a bracha for Arichas Yamim, and he said Nitmit Parashiyar. Right. I don't need years where I don't see Elikos or hear Elikos. And I think it's similar with Ashiras or something like that. So then there's another story where he like went to the Alter Rebbe and said, "Cut off my left side. I can't deal with it." Which I actually like to think of that as kind of like asking for Mashiach in a way. Like that's basically what one of the things that Mashiach is going to do is like cut off your left side. So it's like how on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited would you be to have your Nefesh Bahamas cut off right now? Like I would be 10. Like I'm ready to go. Let's go. But one could be nervous about that. So he wanted his left side cut off, and he got that to a degree. I think it says it like came and went, like the historians that came from that thing. But that was from the Alter Rebbe, and then the whole story with the Mittler Rebbe, how he didn't understand the Maimar of the Mittler Rebbe and everything that came later, and then eventually he reached the Rabbina. So it sounds like he went through a very shleimistic Abira Midas, and then got the Sefer that the Frierdiker Rebbe labeled as the Sefer of Vadisamech, and that in the Siddur and Dach.
Right.
So it seems like certain great Chassidim actually had like a ha'ara of some of these things.
Right. Now, in other words, we could definitely pinpoint that these are the Chidushim of Blessed Love, and the Rebbe is preparing it for us in Nafman Beis, and then we could look back and see some places or people where there was a me'in of that.
Which makes sense because Chassidus was always Torah Mashiach, was always Hachana from Mashiach. Was a Mashiach told about Shem Tov Kishafus Ma'asach Chutza. So it makes sense that the people who really, 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 really got Chassidus, the experience that they had was something that we later on point and say, look, Lasalava, everyone's going to have that.
Right.
Oh, doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
But I think in an often base, it's like the Rebbe putting these things as like, this is the Seder now, like Shavuot L'chol Nefesh.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So this is basically saying that like, if you want Frum Greatness, then these people experience Frum Greatness. This is is the way, like Mashiach tells Baal Shem Tov, Mashiach is going to come, so that's the ultimate greatness. And then everything till then, everything after the Baal Shem Tov told that to Mashiach told to Baal Shem Tov, is giving us the formulas of how to have that and how to be able to bring that in actuality, but to incorporate that into our lives.
Yeah. I actually heard it's funny, like we're talking about all this as being Chidushim of the Rebbe, but I actually heard, this Rabbi Tovia Singer does like anti-missionary work.
Yeah. So
I listened to a talk that he gave to, I'm pretty sure it was to Yidden, I don't think it was one of his anti-missionary ones. And he said something, and I'm like so curious where he got it from. But he said something like he talks mostly about Tanakh, like Nevuah. So he says like every Nevuah about Lasid Lavai is both a nevuah about Lasid Lavai and also a description of how really it should be now.
Wow.
Which totally makes sense because it's Hashem's vision for the ultimate future if it could be approximated now, like why would that not be a great thing?
Right.
But I was so curious where I got that from, because to me that's like, that's an off the base. You're learning an off the base and not telling everybody. So the Rebbe talks about, something we work in chinuch, like we spoke about. And I think one thing that's very, very important is, it's funny to preface it by saying it's very important. It's a very important thing is to appreciate that Yiddishkeit is not only because it's very important, like in a way where you're not important.
Okay.
And a lot of what we're saying ultimately is that Yiddishkeit includes it being really good for you. Even though I know we had a whole section about everything that Hashem does is good, even if it's not the type of Dirah B'tachtonim. But ultimately, that's actually part of making the ultimate life for you also. And that's a big part of what we're saying from greatness. A Jew's life is supposed to be going well, So the Sikha of Shoftim talks about the mitzvah in Parsha Shoftim of Shoftim v'Shedrim Titah l'cha v'chol sha'arecha. So the leadership model expressed in that pasuk is an authority and an enforcer, right? And I think Rashi even says, like, it shouldn't be that Torah is left up to every person's feelings, whether they want to do it or not. It's there's authority over here. And La'asadava, what's going to happen is, instead of Shaitrim, there's going to be Yoitzim, or in the footnote there says the Shaitrim will be adding even more, like, encouragement, basically. And this is one of those sichas where the Rebbe starts off by saying that he's giving a hirah about. Now, it's very clear, again, from the beginning and end of the sicha, that we're talking about something that started already. Of Ashiva Sheftaya Kvar Shana V'Yat Tzachvat Chila. So if you think about that idea of the shofet and the yoyetz, from the person who's receiving from the shofet and the yoyetz, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So his experience is shifting from one of, I have to do it because the authority said so, and it's very important, and if not, it's going to be bad, to, yeah, there is an authority that has a higher perspective than me, but also the thing he's telling me is the best thing for me.
Right.
And that is what's going to happen last Lavai. And again, that's a clarity that we can have now, that as much as the Rebbe says Kabbalah Sil and has this Heira and that Heira, if we're missing the clarity that this is also going to give you the best life, and you might need help to have it explained to you how, right? You might need a yoyetz to play the role of explaining why what the shofet is saying is the best thing for you. But again, the conclusion is supposed to be that this is the very best thing for you. And I think that we have such a focus on Kabbalah Sa'il that it's very, very easy for someone to miss that and to feel like it's important for you to do Yiddishkeit. Mm-hmm. Are you important? Questionable. Is your life supposed to turn out good? Questionable. If we all had clarity about this, there wouldn't even be a need to have a conversation about Frum Greatness.
Right.
The whole idea of Frum Greatness, honestly, for me, was born out of seeing what a lot of us are going through. And that we're not experiencing life in the way we're talking about. So, I think a good way to end this off is to say, we spoke about a lot of deep things here. The bottom line is that Yiddishkeit is supposed to be good for you, and that is the position of Torah and Chassidus.
Right.
That is the position of the ultimate truth, of the latest Tekufa, Shoftim and Aleph, and other places. Like, your life is supposed to be awesome. and Frum awesome, Frum greatness. It's being Frum should mean, and this is really the way Yiddishkeit was presented to me at the very beginning. The Jewish way of doing marriage is better than the secular way of doing marriage. The Jewish approach to Parnasa is going to be more successful than the non-Jewish approach to Parnasa, if there's not one non-Jewish approach.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But the point is, when you follow this approach, it's supposed to be very good for you.
Right.
And I used to think of that as like an initial phase. Oh, that's for Kiruv, we point out how it's good for you. And then when you really get into it, who cares if it's good for you? There's a truth here. There's a Kabbalah Sel.
Right.
And it's true that we can mature past our self-interest. But when you keep reaching higher into the ultimate truth, you come back to, the ultimate truth.
Becomes yourself.
There's room in the ultimate truth for your life to be going awesome.
Right.
And that's what's really supposed to be happening.
Beautiful.
So thank you so much for this opportunity to try and contribute to making that happen for more and more Yidden. That's what I'm all about.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. L'chaim.